Recording in progress.
Good morning. Hello, I am Mayor Betsy Nash, and welcome to the March 21st Special City Council meeting. This is a hybrid meeting with City Council, city staff, and members of the public participating virtually and in the City Council chambers. The meeting is anticipated to conclude by 2 p.m. As stated in the staff report, public speaker time will be limited to 2 minutes per speaker. However, if there are more than 20 speakers, the time may be limited to 1 minute, 1.5 minutes per speaker. We also ask that if you are in person, please submit your speaker cards to the city clerk, and if online, raise the virtual hand feature at this time. Today we have in-person interpretation services available. Please visit the table in the back for a headset. For those in virtual attendance, please note that there is a globe icon near the hand feature on your screen. Our interpreters this morning are Amada Sosa, Angelica Villagran de Gonzalez, Ricardo Perez, Angela Thielen. Thank you all for your time and services today.
Buenos días. Hoy contamos con servicio de interpretación presencial disponible. Por favor, acérquese a la mesa situada en la parte posterior para recoger un auricular. Para las personas que están asistiendo de manera virtual, por favor, hagan clic en el icono del mundo para que puedan obtener interpretación virtual. Muchas gracias.
I would like to introduce City Council members and staff present in chambers are myself, Mayor Betsy Nash, Vice Mayor Jennifer Wise, City Council members Drew Combs, Cecilia Taylor, and Jeff Schmidt. Staff present include City Manager Justin Murphy, Assistant City Manager Stephen Stolte, City Attorney Nira Doherty, and City Clerk Judy Heron, and Chief of Police Dave Norris. Today, the City Council will focus on high-level priorities that will help shape the next fiscal year budget. The City Council has seen all the submissions by the members of the public. Thank you for taking the time to share your top priorities for Menlo Park. The workshop will also include an opportunity for public comment. Please note that public comment time will be limited depending on the number of speakers to enable the City Council proper and sufficient time to carry out its work during the workshop. Feedback from individuals who submitted online survey responses to the City Council is already summarized in the staff report, and all responses are available as an attachment. Further public comment from these individuals, reiterating the same points already submitted in writing, may limit opportunities for others who were not yet able to submit comments to contribute to the proceedings. For groups of individuals attending the workshop to provide public comment in favor of a shared goal or topic, the city's strong preference would be for groups to identify a single commenter to represent the broader interest in an effort to use limited time efficiently. The commenter could identify the number of supporters in attendance at the meeting, and supporters could also stand during that particular comment to show support. To be efficient with our time, please start filling out our speaker cards now if you would like to make public comment, and turn in your cards at the city clerk desk over here. As a reminder, we are targeting a 2 p.m. adjournment. Regular business. Today, our only agenda item is C1, the annual City Council Priority Setting Workshop. Thank you to the more than 350 community members who responded to our online request for feedback to share your thoughts on our top priorities, and to the many community members who emailed City Council or are attending in person or online today. We value all your input and are proud to live in a city where residents are so engaged. I do have one strong suggestion for all of you providing verbal comments today. Your time at the microphone will fly by quickly, so I urge you to make your main points up front. Bottom line first, narrative second. And a heartfelt thank you to city staff for all you do. Our strong communities, neighborhoods, and businesses are all supported by a city workforce of nearly 400 full-time and part-time employees. You are talented people who keep our city running and help create the quality of life that we enjoy in Menlo Park. Finally, we have a lot of work to do here today. I encourage everyone participating to listen with an open mind to what each speaker says and to assume that everyone is working with good intentions to make Menlo Park an even better place. I'd now like to introduce City Manager Justin Murphy.
Thank you, Mayor Nash. I want to start by thanking the City Council for your time and consideration of the topics that we will cover during today's workshop. Your feedback and priority setting for the next year are invaluable to me and the workforce. We have a robust agenda today and we'll be covering a variety of topics, including accomplishments and challenges from the last year, a financial update, a look at progress, implementing the environmental justice element, and identifying top priorities for the coming fiscal year. We will also have time to preview some ideas to celebrate Menlo Park's centennial in 2027. Our workshop ground rules are for everyone who participates and attends. We mainly want to respect this process and everyone's perspectives, and staying focused will be important so we can use the time effectively today. One tool that we use in our workshop is called the bike rack. We will place any topics that come up today that are not directly related or focused on the agenda to the bike rack. Since these topics will be important, the City Council can consider them in the future. Thank you again for participating today, and I will turn it now to our Assistant City Manager, Stephen Stolte.
Okay, thank you, Justin. So we will start with a look back on fiscal year 25-26, which is our current fiscal year. And first is our City Council work plan. This is developed based on the City Council's top priorities, and it's updated regularly throughout the year. The last time the City Council received an update was March 10th. One thing to note is that many of the projects on the list of 58 projects are multi-year. So I have the statistics here of how many are complete, 16%. The majority are in progress, and then we also have a selection of projects that we actually consider ongoing activities that occur throughout the year. So I would just encourage everyone to check that March 10th update. Next up is accomplishments that have been cited by City Council members from the past year. And the first category is sustainability. There was a number of things here, the electrification of our city facilities, the current projects to install solar at our Burgess campus, which are ongoing, and then the local code amendments focused on electrification that were adopted last year. City Council members also cited the Zero Emission Landscape Equipment Ordinance implementation. This has been a strong partnership between the police department and sustainability staff in gaining compliance with the ordinance. The next category was safe routes projects. In particular, Coleman Ave Bike Pilot was called out, and the Middle Avenue Complete Streets project too. And then there was this category of multi-year projects advancing. One is the Chrysler Pump Station, which is almost complete. The microgrid at the Bellhaven Community Campus also is nearing completion, and then design work for Safer Bay. Another category was our work to provide services to unhoused individuals. And we do this in partnership with the county's Center on Homelessness, Life Moves, We Hope, and other agencies like Caltrans and Samtrans through the Encampment Resolution Fund grant program. Other accomplishments that were cited was just overall community engagement. There were some events like the Public Works Open House or hosting multiple groups of students, but there was also a noted improvement of content that we have on our website and just overall improvements in communications, and of course the adoption of the public meetings accessibility policy by the City Council. Next was emergency preparedness improvements. The council received an update from our emergency preparedness coordinator in February that outlined a lot of the work there. And next was the launch of Citizen RIMS. This is a portal that community members can access. It provides insights into all sorts of public safety data. There's a map. You can click on a bunch of things around the city. The next was approval of a major development called Parkline, and then advancement of housing programs, in particular, the anti-displacement study session. And then finally, so many successful community events. So there was a lot to be proud of over the last year. It's also important to have challenges at the top of our mind as we go into priority setting. And these were some that city council members are thinking about. One is our financial sustainability. We'll hear more about that today when we take a deep dive on financial outlook. Another was staff capacity, recruitment and retention issues in particular. Another one was just overall level of community requests, especially regarding infrastructure needs. Another was the commitments the city has made through its housing element and delivering on them. There was another on just being more efficient with our work and being faster with our work overall. Public safety really resonated, and we also saw that reflected in the community input on our feedback form. And then next was a concept around really understanding what it means to produce a shovel-ready project so that we're eligible for funding, and all of the work that goes into making a project shovel-ready with the design and coordination with so many different agencies and partners. And then an acknowledgement that the climate has changed. Federal and state funding is just different now, and we need a new approach to obtaining that funding. There's new topics being funded, so just an overall new approach. And then finally, in the communications realm, just really being clear about when projects will be completed or milestones will be achieved so that we can set expectations on projects. Since staff capacity and overall recruitment and retention issues come up, we have a slide here with some data on staff vacancies. Right now, citywide, our vacancy rate is 12.9%. And you can see the breakdown across departments on the slide. Just to call out one example, in Public Works, there's a significant vacancy on the capital improvement plan team. So that affects our capacity with some of those capital projects. One thing we're doing at the city right now is focusing on employee engagement. And we launched a survey in February with the same team that conducted our employee engagement surveys in 2019 and 2017. So we're able to track results over time. We had a great response rate at 57%. This is for all city staff, both full-time and part-time. And we have top-level preliminary results as we work through the rest with the consultant, the rest of the analysis. And the good news is that our employees really think that their work makes a difference. That's really important to them. And the other thing is that they really care about their teams. So that team environment is really good in Menlo Park. But there's also opportunities to improve. And that's what we're really looking for in the survey. One area is just prioritizing a positive workplace culture, overall well-being. And the other is managing organizational change and improving how we do that. So we'll be releasing more information on the results as they're finalized with our consultant, and then providing a roadmap for work at the department level, taking a deep dive on some of the issues that come up to really get to the heart of the matter so that we can improve things. So next up, we have our Assistant Administrative Services Director, Fenny Lay, to give us a financial update.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to present at this workshop. Today's discussion provides an overview of the city's financial outlook, including current trends, updated projections, and the key factors shaping our fiscal position. Our analysis indicates the city is facing significant financial challenges that will require thoughtful consideration. The purpose of today's discussion is to present a clear and comprehensive picture of where we are and begin framing options to support long-term fiscal sustainability. This presentation is intended to be informational and to help prepare for the policy discussions and decisions ahead. This morning, I'll walk through 4 key areas. We'll begin with a brief overview of the broader economic environment and the specific financial challenges affecting the city. From there, we'll review a preliminary 5-year forecast to illustrate how revenues and expenditures are expected to trend if current conditions continue. Next, we'll discuss a range of potential balancing strategies to help address the city's structural deficit, along with how those strategies could affect the forecast. Finally, we'll close with the next steps and how this work will continue as we move forward through the upcoming budget process. In this section, 3 key financial challenges we will focus on are the vehicle license fee shortfall, capital improvement project funding alignments and constraints, and equipment replacement funding gap. Economic conditions are becoming more uncertain, with rising energy prices, unfolding conflict in the Middle East, slowing GDP growth, and declining consumer confidence index are increasing the risk of a downturn or a recession. Recent federal policy changes are creating new budget pressures for California, our state, particularly in healthcare funding, contributing to a growing state deficit. These challenges may also affect the state's ability to fully fund commitments to local governments like vehicle license fee backfill. The first major financial challenge facing the city is the vehicle license fee, or VLF. For nearly 50 years, until the late 1990s, VLF was a stable source of local government funding, fixed at 2% of a vehicle's value. By 2004, VLF rate was permanently reduced to 0.65%. This created a major fiscal gap for cities that relied on VLF revenue for essential services. To bridge the shortfall, the state implemented the VLF swap, largely using Educational Revenue Augmentation Fund, or ERAF dollars. As you can see in the slide right there, 0.65% of VLF would generate $130 on a $20,000 car, and the remainder, $270, was promised by the state via a swap. So what is ERAF? In the early 1990s, the state created ERAF to redirect property taxes from cities and counties to fund K-14 education, shifting some school costs onto local governments. In counties with more non-basic aid school districts, property taxes are heavily diverted to fill funding gaps, creating a large ERAF pool. In contrast, counties like ours, with more basic aid school districts that already meet funding targets locally through property tax dollars, see far less diverted, resulting in a much smaller ERAF pool available to do the VLF swap mechanism. In fiscal year 2026-27, the city is projected to face a 59% shortfall in VLF revenues. Historically, the state fully reimbursed this gap 2 years in arrears. But beginning with the 25-26 state budget, reimbursements were reduced to about 2/3 due to statewide budget constraints. The June 2025 forecast presented to council did not reflect this change in the out years, making the reduced VLF backfill a major driver of the updated structural deficit. This bar chart illustrates the difference between a pre-1999 VLF revenue and the current situation faced by the city. So as you can see, assuming a $20,000 car, pre-1999, that generated $400 in VLF revenue. Now we're only at $130, with the state doing a VLF swap with ERAF pool of $34. Our shortfall is $236. Previously, the state would backfill that 2 years in arrears, 100%, but not anymore. So that's what we're seeing the shortfall. One-third reduction in the state VLF backfill has resulted in significant revenue losses, including an estimated $7 million impact to the city over the next 5 years. To date, the city has already experienced its $3.8 million shortfall. The future backfill remains uncertain given the state's ongoing budget challenges. While the current forecast assumes VLF backfill at 2/3, the governor's latest proposed budget for 26-27 includes zero backfill. As a result, it is prudent to revise our assumption to zero as part of this budget process, which would add to our deficit, consistent with actions being considered by neighboring cities. Given this, budget reductions will be necessary, including a recommendation to temporarily pause the community funding program. Now let's go into some other financial challenges facing the city. The funds listed on the slide, along with a few other CIP funds, do not currently have sufficient fund balances to support the projects budgeted within them. What that means is, if not actively managed, this imbalance could create real cash flow challenges as projects move forward and expenditures come due. In response, Public Works is conducting a detailed evaluation of project portfolio to identify opportunities to defer, scale back, or reprioritize projects to better align expenditures with available funding and address the shortfall. The Public Works Director will provide a more in-depth discussion of this issue and potential options at the May CIP budget study session. The final major financial challenge facing the city is a funding gap for vehicle and equipment replacement. The Vehicle Internal Service Fund, or ISF, has been underfunded over time due to short-term budgeting practices and past pauses in contribution. Recent vehicle purchases have fully depleted the fund balance, leaving no dedicated resources available to replace vehicles or equipment in the event of critical failures across the city's fleet of more than 200 assets. A right-sized fleet replacement plan supported by a sustainable funding strategy will be necessary to rebuild reserves and implement a multi-year replacement schedule. This chart here shows the city's major revenue and expenditure categories by relative size. I'll highlight a few key revenue sources. Property tax is the largest, making up roughly 45% of total revenue. It is relatively stable and projected to grow at 4% annually, though growth is limited by Proposition 13 and depends on property turnover, which is when property is sold and the reassessment is triggered at the county level. While it provides a solid foundation, revenue growth is not keeping pace with rising expenditures. Another important source is the transient occupancy tax, or TOT, which accounts for about 20% of total revenue. Voter-approved changes increase the TOT rate from 12% to 15.5% in over 2 years, helping offset some of the revenue loss from UUT and VLF. We also want to thank the voters for their support of this measure, which provided a critical boost during a challenging period for the city. This forecast is built on a few key assumptions that drive the city's financial outlook. Our property and sales tax projection rely on consultant reports reflecting current economic trends. The vehicle license fee shortfall, which we discussed earlier, assumes a 2/3 state backfill, an assumption we'll likely need to revisit in this budget process and revise down to zero. And we are assuming that successor agency debt will be fully paid by the end of 2029. For our city, these successor agency obligations are expected to be retired by 2029, like mentioned, after which the city will receive about $900,000 annually in additional property tax revenue. It's important to note that the properties in former RDA area are taxed the same as all other properties under Prop 13, RDAs only affect how tax growth is allocated at the county level, not how property owners are taxed. And here you can see a map of our RDA. On the expenditure side, we've made several key assumptions as well. First, our vacancy factor and personnel cost assumptions are consistent with prior year. New this year, we've eliminated the operating factor, which did not accurately reflect actual department expenditures. We are assuming a $1.7 million contribution to vehicle ISF as part of the funding strategy, and the general fund contribution to general CIP is assumed to remain flat. In this chart, you can see that revenue is outpaced by expenditure with an average $8 million structural deficit. And I'll pause here for just a moment. As a result of that, this is what's happening to our general fund reserves, our fund balance. So under base scenario, which is the current scenario, we don't do any changes. We don't incorporate any changes. The unassigned reserve is projected to be fully depleted by fiscal year 26-27. By 27-28, reserves are expected to fall below the levels recommended by Government Finance Officers Association, or GFOA. And by fiscal year 29-30, the general fund is projected to have effectively exhausted all of its available spendable fund balance. Our current reserve policy includes two main types of reserves: emergency contingency reserve and economic stabilization reserve, with reserve targets listed on the slide. Currently, we're below these recommended levels, partly because fiscal year 2024-25 ended in a deficit. Reserves are critical as financial shock absorbers and play a major role in credit ratings as well. For context, GFOA recommends a minimum of 2 months of operating expenses, while top-tier credit ratings, AAA, typically require total reserves above 30%. For reference, ours is hovering around 37%. So we're getting close to that. Falling below these thresholds risk a credit rating downgrade and limits the city's ability to issue bonds and the cost of borrowing, flexibility to respond to economic shocks, and potentially impacting essential services. Additionally, the ongoing UUT court case led the city to record a $9.5 million liability in 23-24. Now, some of this may be reduced after the final judgment, slightly easing general fund expenditure potentially in fiscal year 25-26, but it is unlikely to replenish the reserves. As highlighted in the previous sections, the city is facing significant fiscal challenges. While there is still an opportunity to take strategic actions right now to protect the general fund reserves, the window to do so is narrowing. Without meaningful adjustments in this budget cycle, the structural deficit combined with other financial challenges will continue to deplete the general fund reserves. In this section, we will present recommended balancing strategies designed to stabilize the city's finances and reverse the current trend. First, we recommend updating fees and overhead allocations from the recent cost of services study to better reflect true service costs. We also plan to improve business license compliance with support from HDL to ensure that the city is capturing all the revenue it is owed. At the same time, we propose reducing and realigning department budgets while continuing a targeted approach to hiring that prioritizes critical positions and manages costs. Finally, we recommend exploring new revenue opportunities to support the city's long-term financial sustainability. An important budget strategy is ensuring that the cost of service, direct service, is fully covered by updated fees. Updating our master fee schedule will have a meaningful impact on the city's 5-year financial forecast. This item will first be brought to City Council as a study session on Tuesday, March 24th. This table here summarizes the recommended changes in numerical terms. If all of these updates are implemented, the structural deficit could decrease significantly from about 7 million to less than $500,000. One important point to note is that the projected new fee revenue is based on fiscal year 24-25 activity. Any changes in development activity could affect this projection either upwards or downwards. With the recommended changes outlined in the previous slide, the structural deficit is reduced to approximately 1.8 million annually and is projected to transition to a balanced budget by fiscal year 2030-31. One revenue generating measure we want to highlight is business license tax update. Our business license tax has not been meaningfully updated since 1978. In 2024, several nearby cities successfully passed measures to update their business license tax. In 2023, the council reviewed potential revenue generating measures and decided to place TOT measure on the 2024 ballot. If we want to address the business license tax, the next opportunity to bring this to the voters would be November 2028 general election. Assuming approximately $3 million in additional annual revenue from a business license tax, along with the recommended reductions and changes, this would be our most optimistic scenario. It would begin to provide fiscal relief to the city starting fiscal year 28-29 and would allow the city to transition into a surplus position by fiscal year 2030-31. There are other options for generating additional revenue and supporting long-term financial stability. First, a half-cent sales tax could generate roughly $3 to $4 million annually. Second, reauthorizing the UT could bring in about $1.5 million. Both would be considered general taxes and would require a simple majority to pass. Special parcel taxes and debt issuance are other funding strategies for infrastructure-related projects. Part of our next steps for the budget process is we have the budget principal meeting on April 14th, public budget workshop on May 28th, public hearing, budget hearing on June 9th, budget adoption on June 23rd. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
So right now, I will open it up to City Council. Any clarifying questions? Councilmember Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor Nash, and thank you for the presentation about our budget forecast. Is it possible to put a tax measure on for the November 2026 election?
So technically, yes, but it'd be very short runway because we have to get it to the county, I think, by middle of August, and that's 5 months away.
And another question is, in order to increase our business tax, that would need to go on a ballot?
Correct, general tax, yep.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor Nash, and thanks for the presentation. Two quick, one general question, one clarification. On the half-cent sales tax measure, did you say, I might have missed it, how much we expect that could potentially generate?
About $3 to $4 million.
Got it. And then the debt issuance for the infrastructure projects, do we have, if we were going to potentially group those together into a sort of a lump sum, do we already have that list put together, or are we kind of starting at step one for thinking about all that together in aggregate?
I think we're still kind of in the beginning stages of thinking about those options.
That said, I may add through the mayor that there are a number of master plans, number of documents, the CIP. There's a number of things that could be pulled from for sure. There's a number of documents that identify the need in terms of what gets bundled together. That would be where we're at the initial stages.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much for that presentation. It's excellent. All right. At this point, let's, City Clerk Karen, could you please call for public comment on this item? I'm sorry.
Oh, Mayor, we actually have one more presentation.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, very good.
So,
Thank you.
And it is an update on the environmental justice element with Sustainability Manager Rachel Launder, and she is online today on Zoom.
Good morning, council members and community members. Let me know if I have any audio issues as I present. Thank you for being flexible today. I'm excited to be able to share and discuss the city's environmental justice element with you all, also known as our EJ element. Next slide, please. I'll start by providing background on the EJ, and we will review community identified priorities. We'll then bring focus to highlights from our first year of implementation, and we'll look forward to implementation priorities for our next fiscal year. We'll have time for City Council direction and discussion. This discussion is part of implementing the EJ, as one of our community identified programs of goal EJ7 is to create an equitable civic and community engagement around having City Council considering EJ priorities each year at the annual City Council Priority Setting Workshop. Next slide, please. In September of 2024, the city adopted its first EJ element as part of the overarching Housing Element Update project. The development and now implementation of the EJ focused on empowering the voices of Menlo Park's underserved Belhaven and Bayfront communities, generally the portion of Menlo Park north of Highway 101. The Belhaven and Bayfront neighborhoods are racialized communities with minority and low-income populations that have been historically underrepresented in planning and civic processes in Menlo Park. Approximately 65% of Belhaven households are low income, and non-white residents make up approximately 85% of those neighborhoods. Menlo Park's EJ element is a plan that seeks to reduce or remove local disparities and inequities to support good health. Next slide, please. The EJ element includes a total of 7 goals, which correspond to required topic areas of EJ element development per guidelines from the state of California. The EJ goals include addressing unique and compounded health risks, encouraging physical activity and transportation, and creating equitable civic and community engagement, among other topic areas. Over the 3 years of the EJ element preparation, staff supported the community in refining the language of the goals, and I've identified 3 top priorities, which you can see on this slide. Priority 1, to provide safe, sanitary, and stable homes. Priority 2, to promote access to high quality and affordable food. And priority 3, to reduce pollution exposure and improve air quality. Today's presentation focuses on those top 3 community priorities. However, there are 7 goals in the EJ element that do all work together. These goals can be seen starting on page 384 of today's staff report. City staff are working together across departments and with community-based organizations and community members to bring to life the goals, policies, and programs identified in the EJ element. Staff, through an interdepartmental EJ team, are currently evaluating different funding sources, including our EJ Element Implementation Fund, and our staff capacity to advance key priorities. The community is an important part of implementing the EJ. Community engagement has not stopped with the adoption of the plan, and it's built into our action guide. Many of the programs will require robust community engagement plans and working with community-based organizations, residents, and community members. A detailed report of EJ Element Program implementation activity is provided within the 2025 General Plan Annual Progress Report, which will be reviewed at the Planning Commission on March 23rd and City Council on March 24th next week. Next slide, please. You can also easily view the implementation activities online. We have an EJ website that is maintained regularly. If you go to menlopark.gov/EJ element, it has been updated for our last fiscal year activities across our 3 priority areas. So you can click the tiles priority 1, 2 or 3, and it'll bring you to a table that will share all of the details for the activities that the city and community partners have taken over the last year. So I encourage everyone to check that out as it aims to be more interactive than our PDFs and other reports. Next slide, please. We've prepared a small snapshot to represent 2025 highlights across those top 3 priority goals. I'll start with, the city pursuing development of an anti-displacement strategy, particularly in the Belhaven neighborhood. And we received grant funding from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, or MTC, to design and implement 2 new housing assistance programs, rental assistance and legal assistance, to combat displacement. The city is also participating in a grant-funded multi-jurisdictional housing nexus study, which will support the city's below market rate BMR ordinance and guidelines. The city also conducted a variety of outreach to share housing resources and supported other projects such as the New Oak Gardens housing community for veterans and their families. This project is anticipated to open this spring, with the city also providing $2 million in funding. Additionally, 2 homes were initiated and completed as part of the home preservation program in participation with Habitat for Humanity. The city tree team planted 11 trees in Belhaven and selected a nonprofit tree partner, Canopy. Next slide, please. The Climate Action Plan implementation has focused on community priorities related to air quality, education, and outreach. This past fiscal year, the city formalized a partnership with the Belhaven Community Development Fund to distribute electrification bundles for renters to improve indoor air quality. And we've ramped up outreach for home upgrade services, resulting in the electrification of 27 homes. Our Library and Community Services Department continued providing equitable access to our Belhaven Community Campus programs. As of last month, there are approximately 2,073 hyperlocal residents registered with the city for eligibility to receive the lower cost fees. That's about a 50% increase from the previous year. City Council adopted a policy for public meetings. Oh, next slide, please. Oh, sorry. There we go. Yeah, slides. Yep. Okay. City Council adopted a policy for public meeting accessibility and offered interpretation using the Spanish interpretation request form. 9 City Council meetings had Spanish interpretation, and 2 City Council meetings were hosted at the Belhaven Community Campus. Next slide. The next few slides will highlight some of the community's most frequently identified topics of interest among the top 3 goals and priorities for advancing EJ and Menlo Park. These bullet points highlight city efforts that are underway. Starting with EJ Element Priority 1, providing safe, sanitary, and stable homes, staff will work collaboratively to continue implementation of EJ programs, including presenting an anti-displacement strategy to council, conducting outreach to connect residents with resources through community events such as an upcoming housing resource fair, and breaking ground on new housing, including school district employee rental housing with $1 million committed from city funding and low-income home ownership projects with Habitat for Humanity, backed by $3.6 million in city investment with $3.1 million dispersed in 2025. Next slide, please. The second community priority centers around promoting access to high quality and affordable food. Staff will evaluate the Environmental Quality Commission's recommendations to increase access to high quality and affordable food. Programs recommended by the EQC include, and could total up to $500,000 to pilot if all completed, across 10 different areas. They focused on food security, healthy markets, city events and programs, and community gardens. Recommendations include efforts to provide direct monetary assistance to residents, including assistance to help residents purchase healthy food at local markets, piloting a mobile farmers market with a market match. There are also recommendations for outreach and educational activities. The city could provide regular cooking and gardening workshops and advance plant-forward eating as a city policy for events. And there are recommendations around community gardens, creating partnerships with schools and community-based organizations, and even housing complexes to develop and maintain new community gardens in Belhaven. This next year, we'll also continue outreach regarding food assistance programs, bolstering that support through the creation of a neighborhood services manager position. Next slide, please. The third priority is to reduce pollution exposure and improve indoor air quality, especially in Belhaven. We will work to advance this through targeted air quality education, continued outreach to connect with and support interested residents, and deepening partnerships that we've established, including with the Belhaven Community Development Fund and Climate Resilient Communities. Construction of electrification upgrades at the Belhaven Child Development Center will also be completed this upcoming fiscal year, bringing advanced air purification systems that respond dynamically to high pollution events like wildfire smoke, directly protecting the children and families who rely on that facility. Finally, staff will advance an urban forest management plan and plant 70 trees alongside community members, prioritizing neighborhoods most affected by heat and pollution. Next slide, please. Much of the EJ work is underway and supports this City Council's fiscal year 2025-2026 top priorities. We have received funding for some of the work, and as I mentioned earlier, looking and continually trying to identify grant funding for other priority programs. As a reminder, the City Council will have an opportunity to review our detailed progress next week. And for today's discussion, staff is seeking feedback specifically on EJ priority 2, promoting access to high quality and affordable food, so we can continue scoping and return to council with next steps for implementation. And that concludes the EJ element update. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Looking to City Council, are there any questions, clarifying questions at this point? Councilmember Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor Nash, and thank you for the update on the EJ element. If this is on the City Council's agenda for Tuesday, how in depth, excuse me, do we need to provide feedback today?
Maybe Ms. Launder could prompt you around the food priority with that's an area where we're looking for feedback today. So if you want to go in depth, that's okay.
Thank you. As far as the EQC's recommendation, I'm not sure how much community impact was provided for it. And I know that they created a subcommittee, but just wanted to check in. There are 4 neighborhood community-based organizations, and I only noticed one that was listed. So I just want to find out if we're looking at scoping, if we're including all of those community-based organizations.
I can respond to that if that's appropriate.
Please do.
Yeah. So the EQC did have the opportunity to reach out, I believe, to quite a few neighborhood organizations and nonprofits, but they didn't do full scoping for all of the recommendations. And so today we're looking for feedback if City Council would like to further have staff scope any of the programs, if any stood out as particularly interesting or meaningful in those 3 categories I mentioned around providing direct monetary assistance, having more touch points around outreach and educational activities. And then the last one was around community gardens. And so seeing if there was kind of anything that council would like us to focus on across those 3 program areas, and then staff would do richer engagement with the community partners in Belhaven.
Thank you. I believe with the food access that there needs to be a broader scope where we're not just including, it's not just the community gardens, because there is a Rotary community garden that is underutilized. There's also already farmers markets happening. So I know that none of that was mentioned in the report. So I think that we need to look at what already exists and how to support that and make sure that we are creating a neighborhood access to food as opposed to from the outside looking in. And I also do believe that we need to include all the community-based organizations because the outreach and the goals are different. I know that there was a presentation at the kitchen table chat this past Wednesday that talked about what each organization does. And because it's not mentioned in the report, I'm just making the suggestion that staff consider reviewing it. Thank you.
Thank you. And there was a lot of discussion or a lot of comments within the action table itself, including I thought about some of the additional community organizations. I guess I'm wondering how much, if we have feedback on specific items, is that better off waiting till Tuesday then, or providing some feedback today?
Specific items in the table.
Correct.
You could consider waiting till Tuesday for that. We were really
That's
focused
wonderful.
on food access today.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Any other comments? Councilmember Schmidt.
Yeah, in the spirit of time and waiting until it's more fully on the agenda, I had some ideas. Two quick things. One, I was able to go to the EQC meeting where this was presented and wanted to thank Ms. Lunder and the EQC team for putting this topic on the agenda. I think the subcommittee did a pretty thorough job of at least first pass ideas and recommendations. So it's encouraging to see this become more part of our dialogue and discussion. And then the second is, yeah, there are a lot more. I'll agree with Council Member Taylor. There are a lot more organizations out there working on this entire ecosystem. So doubling down and figuring out whether they're based in the neighborhood or whether they're adjacent to the neighborhood, how do we really use our partners to make this happen? And how do we actually grow some of that talent and skills within some of these neighborhoods as well? So those were my thoughts after hearing the EQC presentation and hearing this is leveraging that network and growing that network. Thanks.
And I guess the other question is, at what point we weigh in on the neighborhood services manager position?
We could actually take the time now if you'd like, and I can give you a little overview of how this would relate. We did highlight. Go ahead.
One other piece, just since we have been talking about finances, how it would be funded, because I know we have a special fund for that.
So when we amended the mid-year budget, we had some information on the neighborhood services manager. The thought is to fund this without general fund money out of a combination of special funds. They could be the Bayfront Mitigation Fund or the EJ Implementation Fund too. So this manager will be focused on the Bellhaven neighborhood, really to connect community members to services, which was kind of highlighted on the slide with food access, resolve community concerns or inquiries, identify or coordinate a city response to maintenance issues or other issues, and then help implement the EJ, of course, too. And then there would be other responsibilities as well.
Thank you. So we will provide feedback, the council will provide feedback on that during the discussion period later in the meeting.
Yeah, we could do that later in the meeting too.
Very good. Thank you. Excellent. Any other questions, comments? Assistant City Manager Stolte, I'll look to you to what comes next.
Okay, we are going to move on to an overview of community input received in the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, so could you advance me to the next slide, Judy? So we received 361 responses to our online feedback forum, which was great. And one of the questions we ask is if the top priorities still apply for the next fiscal year. And you can see that 43% of people supported the current priorities and 51% indicated that they do not apply for the next year. So we took a deep dive on those who said they did not apply. And they do support some of the top priorities, but maybe not all of them. So downtown vibrancy is really coming in the lead here with 87 respondents supporting that priority. And I just want to note that the theme of expanding the permitted uses and updating the zoning on Santa Cruz Avenue was a big theme among these respondents for downtown vibrancy. And then you can see the remaining four topics received varying levels of support there too. Two main topics so we have three main topics actually that were coming up in the open-ended responses that were rated as important by respondents. And one is overall crime prevention. And that includes burglary prevention, the use of cameras and ALPRs, and patrols. So 87 people wrote in about that specific topic. Next was ceasing the housing element program to pursue affordable housing on downtown parking lots with 66 people. And then revisiting high density housing sites with 54 people. Next slide, please. We published an analysis with this item that lists all of the priorities that received support from 10 or more people. And we also published all of the public feedback forms in the staff report as well. So you can kind of see that there's some other topics there as well. Okay, and that concludes the overall summary analysis. At this point, we were going to move on to public comment, and then we would take a brief recess after that.
Thank you. City Clerk Herron, would you please call for public comment at this time?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Nash. So at this time, if any member of the public wishes to provide comment on today's agenda item related to the 2026-27 priorities, if you are in person, go ahead, return that speaker card to me here at the clerk's desk. If you're virtual, now's the time to engage that hand feature. And if you're calling in, please press *9 now. All right. So I'm going to give everyone just a couple more seconds here. If you are in person, return that speaker card. And if you're virtual, engage that hand feature. Calling in, press *9 now. So we are at about 16 speakers.
Thank you. Let's stay at 2 minutes then. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Nash. And so with that, we will begin with Adrian Silva, followed by Juan Pinzon.
There will be a clock, and we will also have a bell when 2 minutes is up. Thank you.
Good morning, council members and staff. My name is Adrian Silva, and I am an Encinal parent and volunteer for our Safe Routes to School program. My views represent those of Menlo Park parents that participate in the city's Safe Routes to School program, and we want to ask the city council to prioritize infrastructure projects that benefit our children. With a limited budget and staff time, the streets that children use to get to schools, parks, and sports fields should be prioritized for safety upgrades. I want to provide 2 supporting policy recommendations. Recommendation 1, the city's Safe Routes to School program should prioritize infrastructure over all other elements. While education and encouragement are important components of the city's work, for many parents, the limiting factor for sending their kids to school, walking or on their bike is unsafe traffic conditions. City staff time and resources spent on this program would be more effective if they were directed at bringing safer crosswalks, intersections, and bike lanes to our schools. So that's specifically the Safe Routes to School program that the city operates. Policy recommendation 2, the city's Safe Routes to School program should work with parents to implement existing projects. We're asking for engagement to the school communities from the city for existing projects. The city's transportation master plan has a list of projects around our schools that have seen no forward movement. This school year, Encinal Elementary had a walk audit, and we have not really gotten any engagement from the city about the possible upgrades that could happen on city streets around our school. Due to our budget deficits, city staff should pursue grants to fund construction projects. Whether the budget is balanced or not in the coming years, children will continue to ride their bikes or walk to school. It's up to us to provide them with safe streets. I'll close out my comments with a specific action item for the Safe Routes priority. Members of the City Council, please direct city staff to engage the Menlo Park parent community to help implement safer sidewalks, crosswalks, intersections, and streets for our children on their way to and from school. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Juan Pinzon, followed by Pam Jones.
Good morning. My name is Juan Pinzon. I'm a parent at Encino Elementary, and I'm a member of the Safe Routes group. I live in the Willows neighborhood, so I get to use a lot of infrastructure from Willows to cross the town over to Encino. And so I have 2 things that I want to say today. First, I wanted to thank you for the project in Coleman Avenue. I'm a heavy user of it. I love to see projects like that. I see the kids in the morning, every morning. They're just safer. I see more parents going over that route. So thank you for that. I hope it turns into a successful project. Now I wanted to talk about one avenue and a project that I never seen engagement on it, and is Middlefield. Middlefield is a particularly interesting challenge for the infrastructure of the city, in my opinion. It is Kerry Road because of heavy traffic, and it's also the traffic is ever increasing at this point, right? Pedestrians, bikers, and cars are competing for a space. Yet it is ironic that there is plenty of space in that avenue to do a good project and share that space safely. I see many kids taking it, and I'm worried that as the SRI projects and the geological projects, all of that area is going to change the traffic. And I will hope to see that there is a plan to improve that area. I see pedestrians avoid it, bikers using the pedestrian path. There is actually a grandmother that walks her grandson to school every day, and she takes the bike path. So she tells me that she takes the bike path because—
Please wrap up. Thank you.
She feels unsafe on the pedestrian walk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker will be Pam Jones, followed by Meredith Rohr.
Good almost afternoon. Pam Jones. I'm a Menlo Park resident living in the Bellhaven neighborhood. I sit on several boards. I'm a member of various organizations, and I speak for myself. I support continuing the 5 priorities as has been focused. It is difficult to stop in the middle of and shift gears in the middle of priorities, and especially with the funding that we have when we try and add anything new. I have some specific comments on the parts that refer to the EJ that are woven into the 5 priorities. With EJ 5, the anti-displacement policy has to be something that's based on data that shows that it is actually preventing people from the community being displaced. We don't have that information. We need to start at some point. On EJ4, I want to support the organizations within the community that are already providing the farmers markets that have been very successful, and want to let you know that the organizations we call them together, specifically the Bellhaven Collective, and we have had done presentations to the community on that collective. In EJ2 is to include the old homes, rewiring them. It's been silly of us to run around trying to do electrification on old homes that have the old wiring and not have any provision to replace them so that those homes can qualify. And that's probably a substantial number of homes that have been visited that we may not even have the documentation on that because it was early in the program when the organization that was in charge of it then, their outreach was very challenging. I also want to support, as a part of the vibrancy in downtown, is the housing on the parking lots. And I'll save the rest of my comments for Tuesday in the EJ. I'm really looking forward to talking about the EJE. Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is Meredith Rohr, followed by Savita Keeney.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm a Bellhaven resident, and I am speaking for myself. I just wanted to thank you for your continued focus on environmental justice, and I just wanted to elaborate a little on Councilmember Taylor's comment regarding how Bellhaven is primarily a residential neighborhood, and we want to advocate involvement at the CBO level. We really would like a local approach with a focus on legacy residents. That is what I have encountered as a public comment on a regular basis as an attendee of these CBO meetings. I can also say that they are well attended, and I also wanted to speak to my support for the Bellhaven Action Farmers Market. It has been an incredible event for our community. We run out of food almost immediately, and it also just brings people together, and we share resources, we discuss about what's going on in the area, and that's all I have. Thanks very much.
Next speaker is Savita Keeney, followed by Carol Orton.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council chambers, staff, and everybody else here in the community. I'm Savita Keeney, and I'm a resident of Willows in Menlo Park here. I want to just talk about not just the priority setting, but how we actually finish things that we begin and do them well. In the Willows neighborhood, I have watched for over the last 5 years. We do inconsistent projects from sidewalks, street lighting, to street calming. It's a complete inconsistent execution, lack of quality, and lack of oversight. Just biking down here to the city council, I was biking on the Willow Road from Middlefield to here. Those roads were laid last year, but the quality and consistency of the implementation do not match expectations. The uneven layout, the uneven marking is just ridiculous. When basic elements like these feel incomplete, we don't see the transparency of the process. I also want to highlight one more important project, the Willow 101 landscaping project. The bidding for that project was supposed to begin in spring 2025. We are in spring 2026, and I still don't see a complete plan or execution plan in sight. These are not isolated. I have watched this for over the last 10 years of being a resident in Menlo Park. Before approving any new project, I urge the city council to understand what resources we have in place for execution, from public works to any kind of climate action. Willows 101 is a good example of a climate action alignment because it creates clean quality air for both Willows and Bellhaven residents. Complete existing projects, ensure consistent, high quality execution on time. This is not about our public funds. This is about being transparent with
Please wrap up.
residents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Carol Orton, followed by Chantel Watkins.
Good morning. I'm Carol Orton. I'm a 33-year resident of District 5 in Menlo Park, and I'm speaking as a private citizen, not in any other role. I wanted to express my strong support for the continued priorities of downtown vibrancy and housing, and to ask that any action plan for those two priorities include attention to the main library here on the Civic Center campus. I think the success of both of those priorities would be enhanced by making sure that we proactively plan for the future at the main library. That's because libraries now, and in particular the Menlo Park libraries, are not just a place to check out a book. They're a community resource, they're a community hub, they're beloved and well used by our residents. As an example, over about half all Menlo Park residents are active library card users. The number of programs we offer just at the Menlo Park Library here at the main campus, last year there were about 500 programs offered with about 14,000 participants. Monthly, there are between 12 and 15,000 visits to the Menlo Park main library. And as we look at the additional housing going in along the corridor on Ravenswood and along Middlefield, and the vibrancy that we're hoping for in downtown Menlo Park, the demands on the library are going to be even greater. So I'm asking that you include an action plan for the library along with those two priorities. Thank you very much.
Next speaker is Chantel Watkins, followed by Karen Grove.
Hello. Okay. Hello, City Council members, and good morning. My name is.
Chantel, can you get just a little closer to the mic?
Oh,
Thank
my
you.
bad. Sorry. My name is Chantel Watkins, and I'm a Bellhaven Action staff member and Bellhaven resident. I would like to highlight the work of Bellhaven Action in Neighborhood Farmers Market. This market was created and directed input from community members and reflects strong community-driven effort to improve access fresh, healthy foods by listening residents and marketing designs and meet the specific needs of neighborhoods. If not only increase access to foods, but also build trust and bring community together. I want to also thank the city to support this continued leadership in environment justice. Bellhaven Action work supports these efforts by helping expand the access to food and important resource. I hope the city will take the notes of these efforts, strong examples of how community led programs and effort address local challenges. Thank you for your time and consideration. Thank you.
Okay, next speaker is Karen Grove, followed by Shirley Chu.
Hi, hi, my name is Karen Grove, and I am here representing Menlo Together and just lifting up the city priority. Basically, we support the existing city priorities and re-articulated that, and only added one item, which was to consider reviewing our policies to make sure that our community is protected from ICE and other federal agencies' overreach, as we've seen in other places. And there are many local examples, and I will refer to our online comments for the details there. And we're available. I'm also going to speak as myself. I live in D5, and I know that my neighbors have experienced some burglaries, and that happened to me when I was a kid, and it's very upsetting, and I have a lot of empathy for it. And also, there are many, many, many aspects to public safety, and I believe that the current priorities enhance our public safety. I also believe that these 5 priorities that we're discussing, or however many today, are after public safety. I've heard many times that the city's #1 priority is public safety, and I believe that to be true. I feel extremely safe in Menlo Park. So as a resident of Sharon Heights, I wanted to offer that perspective. I think we're doing fine on public safety. The world is what it is. But thank you for what you are doing. I think that's all I had to say. I'll just re-articulate housing, housing, housing for downtown vibrancy and for public safety. Give people a place to live. Thank you.
Next speaker is Shirley Chu, followed by Jesse Soto. And just a reminder to our commenters to get pretty close to the mic so everyone on Zoom and in the room can hear. Thank you.
Okay, climate action needs to start from City Hall. You need to dial down that AC. Sorry, just, okay. My name is Shirley Chu. I live in District 5, and I have been appearing in front of the City Council many times. Every time it's about, either housing or public safety, especially the residential burglary for the last couple years that hits our District 5 really hard because of the proximity to the highway for the thief for their escape route, and we finally get the attention, the commitment from our police chief, and and I read your public comment, the news release by you, and your commitment to fight crimes and all the tips to help us to fight crimes. And also to your credit, you are the one that secured the license plate reader program for our city. So which is like 2.5 years later than our neighboring city. And I really, you should take credit for that. And but we do need the entire city council to step up your leadership. And our Sharonheim Homeowner Association had 189 members, and District 5 West Menlo has 32 Melanists, neighborhood Melanists. So that's like a 221 household in that entire district. And I can't speak for everyone, but this is all we were talking about, our communication about who is being burglarized, whose house, that has children, facing the robbers alone in their household. And it's just dangerous and dangerous. And so,
Please wrap up.
The police chief cannot fight crimes by himself. We need all of you to give him the direction and the resources to fight crimes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Jesse Soto, followed by Jesus M. Soto.
Hello, my name is Jesus Soto, or Jesse Soto. I'm a resident of Belhaven, and I wanted to speak about the electrification, which I was an active part of the program. I think it's a wonderful program, and it's been very beneficial for my family. I have children, and it's great to, especially with this heat wave, to have that AC and heating in the winter. That's part of the nice thing that the city has done for our family and for my children's safety. It also brings up the safety in general, which is the infrastructure, and I think that streets need to be looked into a lot more, and just crosswalks and signage to avoid injuries. I know that this past week there was an injury on New Bridge. It had to do with a bike, so I want us to focus on the safety, the air quality of Belhaven. I think there's a lot more to do. When you see, this landscape out here, it's a lot nicer, and I think we should do the same for Belhaven and just clean up the streets, make them safe, and bring that pollution down in the air by planting these trees. So an emphasis on the 101 project and tree planting needs to be accelerated. Especially by bringing in native trees, some things that can really make an effect, a positive effect on our quality of living. Thank you.
Next speaker is Jesus M. Soto, followed by Linda Itzconti.
Hello, my name is Jesus Soto, and I'm here just to say that I hear about the electrification program, and I think it's very good for the community. I kind of on the waiting list. Hopefully it goes through for me. I'm not sure. But also want to mention in another subject about the swimming pool in Bellhaven, that I would like to keep that as a public swimming pool if it's possible. And as well as I hear something about those trees that are being planted, the canopy trees or something, or the program. And I see that we have one tree in front of our house that is a sycamore tree, and give us quite a few allergy, myself and mostly my wife. And we want to see if that will be able to be removed and exchange for a different tree if it's possible. So I hope this could happen, and that's why I'm here to tell you guys. Thank you very much for your attention. Bye-bye.
Next speaker is Linda Itzconti, followed by Jocelyn Anaya Galvin.
Hi, I'm Linda Itzkovitz. I'm a resident of Sharon.
Linda, can you get a little closer to the mic?
Can you hear me?
Great, thank
Okay.
you.
Hi, I'm Linda Itzkovitz, and I'm a resident of Sharon Heights, and I've been since 1996. Thank you for your service. We really do appreciate all that you guys do. I know it's a lot of work, and we all have different opinions coming to you today. But right now, we really need your help. We need to focus on burglary and crime prevention. We no longer feel safe in our homes. And if we don't feel safe in our homes in Menlo Park, what do we have? Burglary and crime prevention received 87 votes as a write-in, the same number as your top initiative on the ballot. I think that's a statement. We are really begging you to help us. We personally were robbed in the middle of the night in 2007 while we were sleeping and our 2 young children were sleeping. It's a horrifying experience. And many of our neighbors are coming face to face with burglaries today in their home with burglars, and their teenage kids are also, and they have PTSD from these experiences. It's not okay. Every night that I go out during dinner, I'm afraid I'm going to come home and be robbed. I'm happy that I have a large dog at home, but this is a real big problem, and we need to address it. We really urge you to take this as a top initiative. Thank you.
Next speaker is Jocelyn and then Sally Cole.
Good morning. My name is Jocelyn Anaya Galvan, and I'm here representing Menlo Spark. We're largely supportive of all existing priorities, and I really want to make sure that we emphasize the excellent work that the City of Menlo Park has done on the climate action priority. It's shown by things like Menlo Park recently receiving the 2026 Peninsula Clean Energy Green Cities Award. It's an incredible feat to be recognized as the first city in Northern California to approve innovative building codes that phase out gas emissions. And this award is a reflection of the strong leadership, the impact we're actively making here. At the regional level, that has been shown to be adopted by nearby cities and expand our influence. We do believe that a priority should include, that the climate action priority should include some specific additions, one of them being adopting an AC to heat pump ordinance for non-residential buildings. The second is adopting renter protections, to prevent displacement and cost pass-throughs associated with local, regional, state electrification goals. And this should be in coordination with the Housing Department's renter protection ordinance already agendized for discussion this year. The third thing is reviewing Menlo Park's 2025 REACH codes for possible mid-cycle revision in 2027 and cross-referencing East Palo Alto and City of San Mateo's recently passed REACH codes to see if any revisions from those would be appropriate to adopt here. Finally, taking potential new actions in light of the difficulty in achieving the city's carbon neutrality goal from 2025. These should include something related to transportation, like potentially banning new and expanded gas stations or taking other steps to reduce fossil fuel usage. Thank you so much.
Next speaker is Sally Cole, followed by Naomi Goodman.
Hello, this is Sally Cole. I'm the Vice Chair of the Complete Streets Commission, and I come before you to ask that the City Council continue to make safe streets a top priority for Menlo Park. We have a big year ahead, and there's two things I wanted to point out. One is that there's two high crash corridors, Willow and Santa Cruz Avenue, that have both received grants. Thank you to the city for applying for them. And the commission has reviewed plans for both those streets, and we really would appreciate continued support and focus on moving from the planning stage to implementation on both those very important projects. The second thing I wanted to mention is that I appreciate Adrienne Silva, who's been a very active parent in Encinal, who made the first comment today in public comments in person, and others who have emphasized this importance of continued priority on safe schools. I do agree with him that the Safe Routes to School program here could be reconfigured to focus a bit more on implementation and infrastructure and a bit less on encouragement and education to be truly effective. The last thing I want to mention is that the Vision Zero plan that was approved by City Council, and I was on the Vision Zero Task Force and really believe it was a great blueprint for prioritization for the city in terms of safe streets, had two parts. One was focus on high crash corridors to reduce fatalities and serious collisions, and the other was focus on zoned areas like school zones where safety is a particular priority. The Vision Zero plan that was approved by City Council recommended that when it came to zones, the city focus on finding systemic solutions across those zones to make more of a ripple effect with the actions that we take and the money that we invest. I do think there's an opportunity with the school zones, as Adrienne pointed out, crosswalks, intersection, bike lanes. We know where the safety problems exist. If we looked across all the schools, I think we could find some systemic solutions this year. Thank you.
Next speaker will be Naomi Goodman, followed by Ross Silverstein.
Thank you very much. My name's Naomi Goodman. I'm a resident of the Willows neighborhood. I did make this comment in writing, but it didn't make it into the summary table, so some of you may not have seen it. I'm speaking as a volunteer with the Loma Prieta chapter of the Sierra Club Sustainability and Land Use Committee. Menlo Park needs more housing, but should also put a high priority on mitigating the impacts of densification on human health and the environment. In the Parkline Project Development Agreement, the City Council included 3 measures to avoid such impacts: prohibiting biolabs that work with potentially lethal bacteria and viruses from operating close to housing, requiring builders to include measures to prevent bird collisions with buildings, and avoiding unnecessarily bright and upward directed outdoor lighting. These measures should be required citywide, not as one-offs for major projects. Please prioritize development of ordinances in these 3 areas. The biolab restriction fits under emergency response and public safety, but there should also be a top-level category for actions to preserve and enhance environmental quality. Thank you.
Next speaker will be Ross Silverstein, followed by Ken Kirshner.
Hello, City Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead, Ross.
Good morning, Mayor Nash and council members. My name is Ross Silverstein, and I'm a resident of the Willows neighborhood. I want to give general support for any priorities relating to improving our city for pedestrians, bikers, and public transit users as a way to improve safety, as well as reducing the burden that traffic has in clogging our city. My main comment, however, is that I've noticed over the past few years, our city has done a lot of work to think through and establish what we do want to prioritize and accomplish. We've passed a transportation master plan, a Vision Zero action plan, climate action plan, the environmental justice element, and updated our housing element. Those plans are really great, but going forward, we need to prioritize implementation and simply getting stuff done. when we require multiple community meetings or commission and council reviews for straightforward improvements, such as street safety measures or adding crosswalks, things that our staff already knows how to do, we aren't being thorough, we're being inefficient. We're burdening our staff time and taxpayer money. As you set priorities for the coming year, I'm asking that you trust the plans we've already passed, empower staff to make our processes more efficient, and measure results in weeks, not years. Let's emphasize quick builds and faster iteration for all the many things we want to accomplish in Menlo Park. With my extra time, I want to add, whenever I hear conversations about budget shortfalls and fiscal responsibility, I want to remind the City Council and other residents that development and density allows us to mitigate, if not solve entirely, those problems. Developing and building throughout Menlo Park has 3 beneficial fiscal impacts. 1, it's a more productive use of space to have more housing units or stores per acre. 2, it's a way to reset Prop 13 on those lots instead of the burden of property taxes falling primarily on those who have purchased housing in Menlo Park recently. And 3, more development creates more vibrancy, more retail options, and generates more sales and other tax revenues. Thank you all very much.
Next speaker is Ken Kirschner, followed by Amy Mushlin.
Good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council members. I'm Ken Kirschner, resident of Allied Arts. As we plan for more homes and residents, we face a clear choice: designing our street network to support that growth, or accept more congestion, more collisions, and a less livable city. El Camino Real is our main street, part of our high injury network, and directly adjacent to downtown, yet it's not a complete street. In the face of structural deficit and a constrained CIP, this is exactly where we should double down on projects that unlock county and regional funding. I urge you to prioritize a quick build, protected bikeway pilot from Sand Hill to Middle Avenue, paired with Grand Boulevard Initiative corridor planning, a package that would be highly competitive for San Mateo County and regional funds. This turns a budget constraint into leverage, delivering safety, supporting downtown vibrancy, and preparing for growth. Thank you.
Next speaker will be Amy Mushlin.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead, Amy.
Beautiful. I'm Amy Mushlin. I live on the train tracks, and that's what I'm calling about. I've been asked to call in today and represent everybody within shouting distance of my house here who wants to be sure that the quiet zone remains the top or remains on the city priority list. I think you guys will remember last year we kind of went nuts and shook all the branches and had over 100 residents and businesses write in within, I think, 24 hours. We're trying to avoid overkill and didn't do that again this year, but I hope the points have been made and heard and understood. In the world where there's so little we can control and influence, train noise is something we just don't have to deal with. Atherton has been phenomenally successful. Palo Alto is rolling it out on the Alma Street crossing. There is no reason we can't do that here. We hope that you guys maintain this as a priority and keep the forward progress even in the we know there's a lot going on right now. So I think that was pretty much my list. Thank you guys very much and have a good day.
Okay, seeing no further hands or cards, Mayor Nash, we may continue.
Thank you. And thank you so much to all the speakers who came today and all the members of the public who are in the audience or online who are listening, and many have submitted comments already. We really appreciate the input. At this time, we will take a 15-minute recess.
And there's some food available for attendees. It's just outside the door on a table out there. There's light snacks and beverages.
Please, in 22 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Nash. And just for our folks on Zoom, we will be resuming at 12 p.m. noon. Thank you.
in 2 minutes. And our Assistant City Manager, Stephen Stolte, will start us off.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So we are going to move into the priority setting segment of the workshop. And just to give a brief overview, we're looking to select 4 to 5 top priorities. It is important to acknowledge that most city staff are focused on delivering basic services. That's how they spend the majority of their time. But we will use whatever the priorities the City Council selects today to develop the work plan for the next fiscal year, refresh it with new projects, and then inform budget development too. So on the slide right now is just a reminder of what our current 5 priorities are. I think we're all pretty familiar with them right at this moment. Climate action, downtown vibrancy, emergency preparedness, housing, and safe routes. We also have the bike rack items from 2025 from the workshop last year. And just so you all can consider that in your discussion today. The city workforce, recruitment, retention issues were on the list, economic development support. Just pointing out that we did hire an economic development manager since the last workshop, and she is starting up that program. Overall communications and engagement, parking enforcement, services for youth, substandard lots requirements, traffic enforcement, and then union labor and development. So really the 3 framing questions today are, do the current priorities still apply? Should any new priority be removed? Or should any priority be removed, or should any new priority be added based on what we've heard from community input? So.
Thank you. I guess a follow-up question is some of the items, especially on the bike rack, are things, traffic enforcement throughout the city. What would it mean to move it to a priority item, since it's something which is essentially a city function already, which, and just some of these are broad city functions which happen as an umbrella for the organization already. How should we think about that?
I think that's a good point. And there might be items on the bike rack where there's a path forward for them, but it doesn't end up on our priority list. But it's still good. If there are other things you want to add to the bike rack, I'll keep notes on those too. And we can maybe discuss the path that item could take.
Thank you. So I'd now like to open up to City Council discussion. And would anyone like to start? Vice Mayor Wise.
Thank you. And thank you to staff for organizing today, and to all the community members who have come out. So I want to begin by addressing a topic that was heavily input in our staff report and submitted by public comments from residents, and that is burglaries, particularly in my district, District 5. I'm very grateful to the community for all of the outreach they've done. I'm super grateful to Chief Norris for all of the work that's already been done, including a community meeting and a new landing page on this topic. And I want to, I think this is an incredibly important discussion here today. And I guess the way I'm seeing it for these for this priority setting workshop is that these priorities we're talking about are things that are added or removed based on what the city would like to do in addition to our core functions. And I do not believe police and community safety is something we would like to do. It is something we absolutely have to do. It is the number one most important thing. If the city was truly doing nothing else, we should have a strong police force that is taking care of our residents. So, and especially when I'm thinking about future council, so imagine if we added community safety to this priority list, when should community safety ever come off our list? It never should. So I also don't want to put future council in a position of having to remove that. So instead of adding community safety to this priority list, the way I see it, I would rather escalate this and I'm happy to do this, I'm offering to request to agendize this topic, have it brought to a city council agenda, hopefully as soon as possible, where we can have a study session about where we can get all the information around this, hear from our chief, hear from our other police force members, get all of the information in one place, have one forum where citizens can come, hear about tips and things that they can do. We can hear more public comment. So again, I don't believe public safety is something that should fluctuate and be added and removed from a priority list. I always believe it is our number one priority. So I'm eager to hear from my fellow council members what they think based on what they've been hearing from the community. But I would prefer to escalate this, as I mentioned, and bring it to a city council agenda and go from there.
Councilmember Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor Nash. I want to add to that, but I want to take it a step further because I had a little bit of a preface to the priorities that I had as well. I just want to offer some perspective on this process that I touched on last year. I think it needs more structure to be valuable. And, you know, I'm questioning similar to what Vice Mayor Wise is saying. Why are we debating housing over transportation or public safety over climate? Like these are, to me as a city, we have to do all those things. And even when budgets are tight, we have to figure out ways to make things happen in each of those categories. So I want to see us shift this process so that we spend time prioritizing projects and programs underneath a set of high-level categories. So things like, you know, downtown, climate, housing, transportation, those should be standard categories where we're saying, okay, we're going to turn the throttle up or turn it down, but those categories remain, you know, pretty fixed. And then that way, the way we structured the public safety one is exactly how I was thinking about it. There's a macro category of public safety on the summary that you guys put together. And then there's a series of things that we should really go in and say, where do we apply priority, staff, and funding? So not that public safety is where we debate whether to put money and effort or not, but those subcategories that you listed I think are super important. It's because I have a long list of things that I want to see happen. I'm happy to debate at that level, but I don't really want to debate climate versus housing. Like that's a false debate, I think. So I just wanted to echo what the Vice Mayor was saying.
So I see our 4 to 5 priorities right now, 5 priorities as something where we really have not debated housing versus climate versus safe streets, but we're really saying all of those are top priorities beyond the core functions that the city provides, and that they are areas that need special attention. In fact, I believe what happens with the priorities is when the city has core functions, which we provide, and such as public safety as as a top one. Also community development, the building and planning. People need to go get permits through the city, and inspections and all things that just must happen with this city. But then beyond that, there is a list, there's a lot of projects which fall within those, but then also go beyond where we do prioritize them and such, and therefore they do get special attention when they are on the priority list, but not against each other. That's sort of this group together, so that the housing, community action plan, safe streets, the downtown vibrancy, and the emergency services have all sort of risen up. One of the ones which I am thinking about right now is the emergency services and disaster preparedness. That is something that is absolutely a core function, but we didn't really have a focus on it. So I think in prior years, we did elevate that to a priority in order to really focus on it beyond what is just sort of a very basic level. I actually question whether if we want to go down to four priorities, whether that's the one to take off. Not that it's not, it's just, incredibly important, but it has been launched. We've got a good staff we have someone who's now in that position and is working cross-functionally across the organization. But I guess going back to what you were saying, I don't see us prioritizing housing versus safe streets within this prioritization. I see us deciding what are sort of the top items to focus on beyond our core function. And then, Vice Mayor Wise.
Just a clarifying question. So it's my understanding these are not ranked, right? Yes, yeah. So I just want to make that clear. So
thank you.
It's not like, so just because climate action is one on the list does not mean that it's like number one to us. It's just a list.
Yes, all 5 of those items are equally prioritized unless staff wants to state anything different.
They're just in alphabetical order.
Yeah, exactly. Councilmember Schmidt.
But also a clarifying question. So I appreciate what you said. So if there's core functions and those things are going to happen and they're going to get budget and they're going to be in work plans and all that, that's great. I want to see that happen. And then there's things under those core service categories that I think we want to try to elevate. That just really raises the question for me, though, is so as a priority, like, what do you get? Hey, congratulations, Gold Star, you're a priority. Then what do you get versus being a core service? That's what I'm trying to really tease out of this is, does it mean more money? Does it mean it's going to go faster? Does it mean we're going to hire more staff over another core service because it's a priority? Is that, and sorry, I'm looking at the mayor, but I mean, it's more, I'm just trying to figure out how we wade through so much and then what happens as a result of it making to the priority list.
So maybe one example is with climate action. When we compare ourselves to other cities, we have a team of staff dedicated to climate action, and we report out regularly on it. Not every city on the peninsula has that level of effort or focus on it. So I would say having climate action elevated on the priority list means that we've kind of created that workflow around climate action. And the same thing with the emergency and disaster preparedness. We hired a coordinator, we, built that program. So there's that movement there, with downtown vibrancy. Again, we actually, brought on board our economic development manager, and she's doing much more beyond downtown, but, there's that added focus there. So, and that's beyond core services. So
that helps. So with public safety not being on the list in the previous years, if I just take what you said and translate it, that wouldn't have gotten that extra bump in staffing necessarily, or the extra bump in attention or focus. The benefit of being on this list is you get kind of bonus points and extra staffing and extra funding and extra attention. Is that accurate?
I'd say that, yeah, that's largely accurate. And then you get the added transparency about how we report out on the priorities too. And there's that ability for all of you to ask for those status updates. And then, we're being transparent with the community too on these, on our priorities website and more. So that's another
thanks. That helps. Thanks.
Councilmember Combs.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nash. My perspective has been that we've gone both ways on this. Like, right, it has been some element of core services. And then we saw value in highlighting that core service. And maybe there were some additional elements to that core service, but then it was also just that, like, is a priority. And if we are in an environment where things have to be cut, then that would be cut last, and maybe some of those additional aspects of the core service. And then there are some moments where we approach it as just the shiny new thing, where it is completely separate. And so, but that's where, and so to the vice mayor's point, like, I think if there had been a history of us completely and being very formal and sort of saying that, like, we're not going to have this be core service, then I think that your argument would have a lot of validity. But I do have concerns that, like, again, if we have a history to some degree of putting core services on this list, if now residents are coming and saying that, like, we think that public safety is something that should be on the list, I don't think we can say no because it's a core service, because there are examples of core service on this list. And there's example of historically of us putting core service. What it seems as though is that we're ignoring the public. And then other times, like when they said, oh, downtown needs to be more vibrant, again, are that, like, housing, we have responded and said, like, yes, those should be priorities. And so that would be my concern, that, like, it seems as though we are telling, again, if we are looking at that very specific issue of public safety, we're sort of changing the rules on people and saying, no, that can't be a priority because we approach priorities this way when we haven't approached priorities that way. And so if I'm a resident, I'm feeling a lot of discomfort, like, right, with that engagement. I'm feeling like you're not hearing me, and you're not appreciating what I think is a priority should be a priority. And if you don't think public safety should be a priority, you say public safety should not be a priority. But don't change the rules. Don't tell me that there are these new rules that exist to determine what the priorities are. And so, and again, we as a council can make that decision. We can make that determination. We don't think public safety should be a priority, but we should be transparent and honest about that we're saying that we don't think public safety should be a priority because we don't think it should be a priority, not for these other reasons.
So I actually disagree. I believe that public safety for one specific item is it can only be provided by the city, although it can only be provided by the city. And it is so fundamental, as the vice mayor said, to everything the city does, everything about the city existing, everything about being a community, that I agree that we should not have it as a priority because it is so existential to the being of the city itself, and that we are, in fact, very strongly acknowledging that we are hearing what neighbors are saying. We are reading about this. I'm sure we all have had numerous conversations with residents. I know I have. I know the vice mayor has. And I believe we should give it special attention through another study session. And we've already committed to having another community meeting. But I think that I do not agree with putting it on the priority list at the same level as some of our other items, because it is such a core function of what we do. And I think that it is, I disagree that if it's not there, we're not acknowledging a priority.
I just want to say that, like, I know you could say that about anything. You can provide some reason why anything shouldn't be a core priority. And you are like, well, because it's existential. And that's your reason, and that's valid. But you're making certain conclusions based on your own opinion. And that's fine. Other people do it too. But if I'm a resident, like, again, like I was saying, I see it differently. Like, and again, perception or reality, like, if there's a WhatsApp chat and all of my neighbors are talking about burglaries and break-ins, and I go to my city council and I say that this should be a priority, and you're like, well, this is existential, so it shouldn't be a priority. I'm like, well, but there's all these burglaries and break-ins. so why shouldn't it be a priority in that moment? And again, I'm just saying we're making determinations here. We're making decisions. And so like, I would say that like there is value in being responsive to what the public is saying at the moment. And I think that there is a lot of downsides to not being responsive, especially as it goes back to what it is like a core element. Again, but I will, I've said how I'm thinking about that. I do think a part of this exercise is showing that we are being responsive to what the public is seeing is important to them. That's at the core what a lot of this is about. And if the public comes and says this is something that's important, if it's not put on the list, it's because we've made a determination it's not important. And we can rationalize that however we want, but that's exactly what's happening.
Vice Mayor Wise.
No, thank you so much. So I really appreciate that distinction and that comment. And I want to make it very clear that my comments were based on, so there's two different ways to approach this. One, selecting priorities because they are sort of outside the scope and above and beyond what the city does as a core function. And then, or opposite, highlighting the core functions that need to be elevated. And I'm totally open to whatever, you know, folks want to do in either one. So if we're going to go with making our priorities core functions that need to be elevated, totally happy to put public safety on that list. I made my original comments because I was coming at it from the lens of what are things outside of our core functions that we want to work on that are nice to have. Like as just as an example, climate action, as Assistant City Manager Stolte said, that's just not something that every city prioritizes. So again, totally happy either way with however council wants to come at it. I just want to make it very clear that public safety is always like completely regardless of this list is always the number one priority of the city. So if folks want to, again, just whichever way folks want to go, I'm happy to support it, but I just want to make that very, very clear. So thank you for bringing that distinction up.
Actually, I'm going to have Councilmember Schmidt say something, and then we're going to reopen public comment for a moment. We've had some additional public commenters come in. Councilmember Schmidt.
Thank you. And I think this isn't about agreeing or disagreeing with a perspective. I would say what Councilmember Combs was saying, I think I'm going to apply the lens that we just heard about what this is meant to be. So this is how I'm looking at it. Because I would say in normal times, I may not fully agree with you and I'm agreeing with him, but what I'm just trying to do is apply the definition. And so I think if I heard the definition right, a priority is a surge. And you called it elevated, but it's extra resources, it's extra attention, it's extra updates. It's like surge pricing when when you're affected by that. So I think public safety in this moment in time for at least a year needs a surge because we have a problem. Now, to your point, will it need that surge for the next 5 years? Probably not. Hopefully not. But I do think even though we've made good strides and the chief is working really hard at it, I think it's worth a surge for at least 12 months. And then we evaluate again in 12 months. And is it still going to be that surge in resources? There may be other things like the community center in Belhaven that needs a surge for a year. So I'm only applying the definition that I just heard, which is the priorities are not meant to be indefinite and core service replacements. They're meant to be a surge in resources and attention and focus for a 12-month period. So that's why I'm kind of agreeing that at this moment in time, it feels like we do need to surge our resources around public safety. So I just want to apply the city's definition versus kind of debating should it be 1, 2, or 3. Yeah.
Thank you. City Clerk Herron, can we reopen public comment at this time?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Nash. So we did have an additional speaker card come in. So we would like to invite up David Miller. David, we're going to bring that mic up and you'll be all set.
Hello, hello. Okay, thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to share and to give comment. First of all, I just wanted to give my thoughts on the status of the current debate here. I really like the concept of core services and non-core services and prioritizing within those two buckets. I'm a big believer in prioritization. I'm a project manager in my normal job, and prioritization is extremely important. And so I just wanted to highlight that I like that concept, but I also like the fact that public safety is at the top of the core services. That is very important to me. I also wanted to bring up another topic. I just wanted to make reference that there is a homeless individual right out front here, and I'm kind of curious what resources or actionability we have as a community to help this individual, because we've got all the key people right here and that person is sitting right there. So wondering if there's something that we can do to help that individual. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other public comments at this time?
I don't have any additional cards, and I'm not seeing any hands being raised on our virtual end.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will try to address some of what we're doing with homelessness. If not at this meeting, then very soon. Thank you. Councilmember Combs.
Thanks. So again, much like the vice mayor, like I can go either way, but I do again want to make sure I elevate the fact that again, a person or a community coming and asking for a priority, it can feel very hollow if it's not clear like how you're defining that, and if it seems to change how that's defining, and now it's seemingly being defined in a way that the thing that I say should be a priority, it is not going to be a priority. And I do think that something like climate change is a really interesting, sort of juxtaposition, because again, I come here and I say, public safety is a priority. I feel unsafe in my house. You say, no, it's a core service. It's not a priority. But oh, look, the city's getting climate change awards. That makes you feel really good and great. You're getting a climate change award. I feel unsafe in my house. So you failed at the core service that you say I can't make a priority. And now you want to give yourself gold stars, to quote Councilmember Schmidt, for getting a climate change award. But I feel unsafe in my house. And again, maybe that feeling unsafe is not rooted in like a really being unsafe, but that person really does feel unsafe. And that's an important thing for us to address. And so I don't want us to be at this fork in the road and choose a route that seems to, again, not be acknowledging the moment we're in.
Vice Mayor Wise.
Absolutely, yes. So I mean, I think I was just coming at this with a different perspective. I'm glad we had this conversation, and if we're going to move forward with including, core services that we need to elevate, to surge, whatever the word is, then yes, absolutely. Then we need to include public safety on that list. To your point, and as I keep saying, public service is the number one function of a city. It is why cities incorporate. It is the most important thing. We cannot have residents feeling unsafe in their homes. Yeah, point blank. So I'm happy to add it to the list. We'll see where other council members are at, and I'm happy to then have that lens of having priorities based on including core services that we need to surge.
Councilmember Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor Nash. And as this goal setting being the 8th that I participated in, and where we started as a council and how much we've evolved in this process to where we need to actually define what our priorities are, what the meaning of it is. So each time we come into our annual goal setting, that we're actually following that policy as we have other policies as far as how we spend our funds. And I know that community members have stated in the past that to see Menlo Park's values is a reflection of how we spend our money. And a reflection of how we spend our money is what our priorities are. And so when I look at core services, regulatory requirements, which is why housing is on this list, and also the fact that each department has its own work plan. And if there are additional needs that each department has, they bring it to the city manager. The city manager then brings it to the city council. And so I look to our leadership with our city manager. I look to our police chief to say, here's what I need to fulfill the concerns of community members. This is not the first time there's been a rash of burglaries in that area. I'm also looking at department vacancy rates, thinking about how much our core services are impacted by our vacancy rates. And so for me, I look to our city leadership to tell us what's happening, what they need, and how we can be most impactful as a city council in policy and decisions as far as what our priorities are for the year. I've also been very supportive of maintaining the same priorities until it does not need to be on the list. And that's going back from seeing 89 priorities 8 years ago and where we are today. So I would love to hear from the city manager or the police chief as far as this topic, since that is what's kind of on the table at the moment.
Thank you, Councilmember Taylor. So I think it might be whether it's kind of, there was an or question in there. Is that specific to the topic of public safety or about the priorities generally? Which, would you like to hear from me more generally or about or from the chief more specifically about public safety? Great, great. Yes, so as the council member alluded to, if it was roughly 8 years ago, there used to be 80 items on the list. So the city has evolved in how it's approaching this workshop session. So this is the 4th year in a row where we've kind of followed a similar routine. The first 2 years were with a facilitator. Last year and this year are not with that facilitator. So that's kind of we've got and that's where these basic priorities were established 4 years ago, and they've been evolving, refined over the past few years, but relatively consistent. So at some point, I'm not aware of anything that actually documents, like I think there's reference maybe to a policy, maybe it was a need for a policy. I'm not sure there's anything that documents exactly what is a priority, not a priority. And maybe through today's discussion, that would be a helpful item for next year. So that's something to kind of keep in mind, and we can kind of bring that forward to the council while it's fresh in your minds to kind of help for next year's council. But I think providing that sort of definition is helpful. It's also, though, a reflection of the council that's constituted at that time. So that's something that's always going to change, but there are references also to history and precedent and looking back and background. So I think that's helpful potentially as a tool to be considered. So I think there's been a lot of discussion about kind of what is not a priority. I'm not sure that we're going to fully get to that today. So in kind of looking back to the kind of ground rules, sorry, oops. Great, okay. Sorry, I did feel something on my neck earlier, and thank you for finding it. For people online, there was a caterpillar on my neck. So I appreciate the assist. Back to where we're at in this moment today. I want to be cognizant of what we're going to be able to get through in the next few hours. We're not going to be able to kind of fully solve some of the things I think have been discussed. And so there's things that could be looked at in the coming months and next year about the overall process. That said, there is kind of a kind of this differentiation of what to kind of, I'll use the word, what to focus on over the next 12, 18 months, because this is a little bit of a rolling based off of the fiscal years and everything. So I think at the end of the day, that's the most important thing for me is council direction to the city manager, and then from the city manager to the rest of the organization of where to focus our time, energy, efforts. And I'll put a big part of it to energy. You know, that's kind of important thing. So by the end of today's session, if we can identify what are I'm going to use a spectrum of 4 to 6 topics of focus for the organization, that's the main takeaway from today. So I'd rather kind of make sure that we have enough time to work through that and through this upcoming budget preparation process. That's where this is purposely done in the spring to help with the budget preparation process. So there is an issue of time, money devoted to that. And this is where we are coming to this point of challenging fiscal times about our limited resources. So how to make the best use of those limited resources. As any need comes up throughout the year, that's something that has the opportunity to be escalated, elevated as well. So, I think that we've got multiple avenues for input. Today's session is not meant to be the be all end all. It's part of a, along the continuum. It would be extremely helpful for the council to solidify anywhere from 4 to 6 priorities for today. So that kind of gives a overview. I'm happy if there's a little bit more for me on that overview, and happy to kind of turn to the chief to talk about specifics under public safety. Is that anything else for the overview before turning to the chief on public safety? Because I want to make sure that we're able to cover the full spectrum of topics.
I guess what I'm interested in is what does having it be a priority, and I am specifically looking at public safety right now, provide if it's on the priority list or not on the priority list. Well, I will just, without putting my understanding, because if putting public safety specifically on the priority list gives it a different amount of budget, time, money, focus, effort, then I feel differently about it than if it's a core function that will receive. How does this vary other than the good feeling that we are being specifically responsive as opposed to feeling?
You could put that, if you're asking the city manager to list it, then list that for everything. Don't just.
Well, I will, but right now we're talking about, yes.
Public safety, but I think you have to have that conversation in context. Like, what is the value across all of these?
Agreed.
And then but it seems as though in that framing that you're isolating it out and saying, well, what exactly is the value add here? Because you doubt that there's any value add. My question is, let's look at the value add across all of them.
I agree with you. And I think there's, right now, there's a specific focus on public safety. So I'm interested both generally, but also specifically on public safety, because it is something that I think we see as a very core, a top level core function. And so it perhaps has even more attention just broadly, even without being a priority, than something like the Climate Action Plan would if it were not on the priority list.
Yes, so I think there's a few different angles of there between, like, I'll start with the money issue. The money issue would come through the city council budget process. So that would be whether or not there's, if from today, something's on the list, what's the potential in changing moving the needle on a funding allocation? That would kind of come from today's discussion. I would say that it has more to do with the kind of, as it relates to the priorities, it's really more the energy and focus. And I could say I spend quite a bit of time with the chief on the topic. That's not to say we couldn't spend more time. I will say it may be at the, so that's kind of, as we said, a key function. Some of the other items, it's like, what's across departments, what's across the organization. Some of the other considerations on what potentially does have an end goal. Yeah, because I think if something is a priority year after year after year, that means that we probably need to kind of revisit what that is. So back to kind of the original framing of something that could be so core. I think it's important that things should kind of evolve with time.
Thank you. Chief Norris.
Thank you. And I'm going to keep it brief. I know we have a lot of other topics to cover, and public safety really is just, it's one part of this overall picture, right? One thing that I think we need to maintain a viewpoint of is that, we are part of a functioning team, right? There are a lot of other competing interests and competing pieces, many of them critical to the, working order of the city. And we recognize that. And yes, we are a constant, public safety is always part of the picture. We are, 24/7, 365. We are really the only city function that does that. And we recognize that we play an important part. I've been here 5 years now. It'll be 5 years just in a couple of weeks from now. And during that time when I came in, we had a lot of questions about policing, right? That was 2021. There was a lot of concern. We had a lot to do, and it was part of the council goals and priorities, and it was part of something that was driving us, was for us to answer a lot of questions and make sure that you as our community understand and come and get comfortable with who we are as your public safety element. And we also had, over the previous 5 years before I got here, 4 different police chiefs. So part of it was bringing in a sense of stability and a sense of understanding of who we are as an agency and what we're supposed to do. There's been a lot of work on the inside to do that. And if we bring this to a study session or some other kind of focused discussion, you'll see where, over the last 3 to 4 years, crime has gone down. The level of activity of our police officers has gone up because we were in 2020 and 2021, police were very reluctant to do anything. And we're back at a place where we're doing, active things in the community. Crime is going down, and that's good for us. But what happens when the police department is not included in the overarching big, bold letter priorities that are being set by the city council is those giant priorities drive our work plan, and they drive the questions that the city staff and the city management asks of us in the work plan. And over the past 2 or 3 years, there have been very, very little that includes police in the overall work plan. It doesn't stop us from doing our job, but very little in terms of questions that are coming from PD or towards PD in the work plan to say, hey, here are the things we need you to do. And part of that is, they're confident. They know that we're doing the things that we need to do. But it also means that you don't see a lot from us unless there's a flare up, unless there's, a question about a technology implementation that we want to do, or unless there is a spike in a certain type of crime that has, brings a lot to the attention of the community. We would rather be, a North Star for the city to say, one of the things that's most important to us is public safety. And we would like to hear from you on all the great things that public safety is doing so that the public doesn't have this kind of vacuum of storytelling. In other words, city's not asking a lot of us because they know we're doing the job in the background. But the public doesn't see anything that we're doing because we're not reporting out on it, because we're not required to report out on it. So internally, we're doing more to drive that public story because we know we need to, but it's not a requirement of us, and it's not anything that's down in black and white coming from the leaders of the elected leaders of our city. So what I would encourage is to find a way. I love the concept of identifying core services. And I think that if we can put that in bold lettering for our community, I think that will help. It doesn't necessarily need to be, some of the things that I think one of you described it as the bright, shiny things that are coming along that we need to put our attention to. It doesn't need to be a bright, shiny thing. It is, it's a constant hum in the background. But making sure that we're included in that constant hum allows the public to understand that we're part of the constant hum. And I think that's where we come from on it. There's a lot to be talked about how we prioritize our budget. You all saw a presentation earlier today that says we have a lot to talk about how to be really smart about how we set the budget, especially for the next couple of fiscal years. But public safety has got to be, part of that. If we want to maintain that constant hum or even make it louder, we've got to be part of that.
Vice Mayor Weiss.
Thank you to both the city manager and the police chief. That was incredibly helpful. So I guess two questions that I have from here. One, I would like to see if my fellow council members agree with me that we should add public safety to the priority list. And two, if the answer is yes, I, like many residents, just want to make sure that, that this means something, as the mayor was saying. So what are the next steps, especially from how can I be helpful here? Should I still request to agendize a study session? Is that the next step? So I would ask staff that question.
Let's see. I think that's where there's might be a typical process with priority setting is it's considered as part of the upcoming budget process, and then the work plans developed at the beginning of the fiscal year. So that's been the routine the past few years. What I'm hearing from this topic is that there's steps that should be done sooner than that sort of routine. So the council is aware of the agendizing procedure where a council member submits a request, needs to then it's a multi-step process to kind of put that on the agenda. I'll kind of look to the council on this particular topic if that's something that you'd like to schedule irregardless of that, or whether you want to honor the process and have the vice mayor do that. It's also something that with some other things that happen throughout the year that it's a staff initiated effort because it's timely and we feel like it needs to be in the council's attention. So I think it would be helpful in this setting to understand whether the council wants your colleague to go through that process or honor it through this request, or if it's a staff request, because I'd rather kind of deal with the substance of the issue of getting the chief in front of the council and the community than the exacts of the process at this point in time. So that's to that question. So and again, in this setting for people, this is a workshop. This is a slightly different dynamic than our typical council meetings where we're trying to kind of problem solve, work through kind of what could potentially be the best next step. So I just want to see where the council's at that through the mayor.
I guess I would feel pretty comfortable saying that we should skip any formal process to get it on the agenda and just go ahead and put it forward. I think that we could save staff time and other time just by proceeding with the study session.
I'm seeing
agree.
head nods. I know that it might, okay, great. Thank you. Because again, with this, we're trying to reach consensus and with various topics. So that's helpful. So we can take that as direction from today's meeting. Great. And then I'll turn back to the mayor.
Thank you. I know Councilmember Wise Schmidt had been waiting, and then Councilmember Combs, please.
So, I mean, to answer or to respond to the Vice Mayor, I would be supportive of making it a priority. And it could be that in part of making that priority, it could be a lot of educational, that there is a disconnect between what people's perceptions are and the reality. And so that thing that we need to address could partially be this gap, this information gap. But, and so again, it doesn't necessarily mean that making it a priority means that like that there is some specific new service or feature, possibly, or level of service that could be delivered. That certainly could be it. But it is also acknowledgement if what we're hearing is that the crime stats are low or going down, but people are feeling differently, that there is a disconnect, which I think rises to the level that it's something that we have to make a priority. But something the chief said sort of reminded me of some of the history, and it is this idea of like sort of the interconnectedness. And you know, if I think of the climate action priority, part of one of the things as a priority formally and just generally in the city over my time here, part of one of the things that has driven is the electrification of our city fleet, including the police cars. And so if it's a priority for the city for a police to show up at my house in a Tesla, why isn't it a priority for the city that like I feel unsafe in my house? Like, right. And so to me, it seems as though like where we could say that in some ways that like police delivery could be a priority as a sort of after the fact. But in other ways, if the decision here was that like we wouldn't make public safety a priority, that the core delivery cannot be a priority. If it can be a priority for police to ride around in Teslas, it can be a priority for us to ensure that the public is feeling safer at a moment when we're getting information from them that they're not feeling safe.
I will just say that I actually would prefer that you do not characterize the rest of us as not wanting to have the public feel safe. I think that all of us have the same intention, and it's just deciding what is the definition of priority and of how we go about doing this. But I strongly want to make the point that I believe everyone is very aware of burglaries and how invasive, basically how it affects people, how it is tremendously harmful to people. And please do not insinuate that the rest of us are not feeling that as well. I do and let's debate what are the benefits of making it a priority or not.
In my 7 years on this council, I've always said exactly what I think in the moment, exactly how I've wanted to say it. And that will never change. So please don't try to govern what I say, how I say it. I never try to govern what you say. So to be very clear, I made the comments that I
continue this conversation.
I made the comments that I made, and I stand by them 1,000%. If you want me to repeat them, I can repeat them, but I will not change them.
Okay. In an effort to keep moving, I will ask Councilmember Schmidt to please continue.
Thanks, Mayor Nash. So I want to bridge us forward into the priorities as well. I would say part of the reason for pushing to get a better definition of the process is I think we're trying to wrestle a fairly complicated bear to the ground. And I want to play back what I heard as a request to potentially alter the process moving forward. So I think having a better definition of what priority actually means, so energy, surgeon resources, whatever, extra attention, all those things, I think having that codified in the process would be super helpful. I think the second thing is the core service, and I appreciate what the chief said, around being visible and going back and being on the sort of attention list and being a regular discussion topic. I'd like to see that as part of a clear definition of a core service. So I really want to understand the difference written down as part of the process of what is a core service, what does each department get relative to that, and how does the work plan and other elements come forward to us on a fairly regular basis, and then what extra things happen when you're nominated as a priority. And then the last thing I'll say on the process is, and I also want to have a better definition over time of some of these things are programs and projects. They're not even core services. And so what is the definition of that, and how do we impact the prioritization of things like, substandard lots and stuff we've been talking about? Things like that are projects, right? Or quiet zone. Quiet zone, I'm a big favor of, but it's a project. It's not a core service. So the three things that I'd ask the city to consider moving forward are clear definition written down of priority and what that means to resources and energy, clear definition of core service and how often we're going to see those and evaluate those and give them the attention that the chief mentioned. And the third thing is clear definitions of projects and programs and what influence can we have over moving those up and down the list of funding and energy. And then the thing I would say is I actually have four, I would call them priorities based on the definitions as I understand it today, which means an extra surge of resources. So one is I'll start with quality of, I would like to group quality of life and public safety under one because it gives us a bit of a broader remit. So underneath that, I definitely have the break-ins and the surge in policing resources that we probably need to address that. I'd like to see quiet zone under that as well because I feel like it's time to put some extra resource and get that across the line. Things like safe routes to school, things like the pools, those are things under that kind of quality of life and public safety category or priority I'd like to see. Second one is I would actually like us to take a step back and look at planning and funding as a priority. And I think I'd like to see a vision for the city that we start to work on as well. We've got some disconnects with residents that I can feel emerging and that are bubbling. And I'd love us to maybe step back and talk about what is a shared vision for the city with residents and staff and council and everything else. So I don't want to talk about how we do that, but I just want to get it on everybody's radar. We need to account for changes to our population. I think if our population is going to grow by 10,000 people over the next 10 years, we need to be planning for that now. And it's got a whole lot of downstream impact to it. Underneath that as well, I'd like to see efficiency under that category of planning. Asking each each department at the beginning of their planning cycle, what are three things you can do to become more efficient? Whether that's whether that's substandard lots or permits or whatever. So second priority for me is planning and funding. Third is downtown. Downtown is essentially to me economic development plan. So I'd like to see, now that we have a new staff member, I'd like to see those plans come forward and really understand what that is. I kind of loop vibrancy underneath economic development, but I don't want to debate the terms, but I'd like to see that all kind of come forward. What's the plan for downtown? And the ongoing kind of outreach around the housing element, I am also kind of putting under downtown because that's a big focus of some of the attention that we're getting. And then the fourth priority for me is climate. And I don't want to position climate versus housing versus transportation. This is an extra surge of resources. As I said, I think public safety should get an extra surge of resources as well. I want to see things like I want to see the environmental justice element funded and steady execution, the urban forest management plan, green spaces and parks, and things like Jocelyn was saying around heat pumps and non-residential. So I'm not trying to position things against each other. Those are just my four top of mind things that, in addition to core services where I'd like to see extra attention paid and extra resources where we have them. So those are my kind of four, if that helps. Thanks.
Thank you. I am trying to fit what you are saying within the sort of how we have been approaching priorities generally. Some of what I'm hearing you say to me seems like it actually falls under the city manager's role as opposed to council. as far as some of it specifically delving into efficiencies and things like this. To me, is not that's something that we have delegated to staff, and not to discount it at all or say it's not important, but it seems like I don't see us having the bandwidth at this point to get into that. And it also seems like it's something that's clearly within the purview of city management, although I'm happy to hear if you see otherwise. And I was going to take us back to, and I'm trying to figure out how to weave what you've discussed into the conversation of looking at the 5 priorities that we currently have and deciding if all of those still fit, if there's something such as community public safety that we want to add to it. And rather than at this point moving off into a slight tangent and refocusing it sort of in a different light. I think there's a tremendous amount of overlap with how you've described things. Please.
I'm happy to jump in. And apologies. Yeah, the efficiency thing, I wasn't meaning to tread on just the city manager's playground there. I think I'm just trying to say there's some planning and future funding stuff that I would just like us to see as a priority, and it's all kind of in a big category. Efficiency being one of those categories, so definitely leaving it up to the city team to figure out what that looks like. I wouldn't want to get into what's the efficiency per department, like that wasn't the intention. But so to be clear there. And then, yeah, I think because these are a mixture on our current priorities of high level things that are big categories and kind of mixed bag things, my 4 that I was looking at are climate. So that pretty much aligns with climate. With downtown vibrancy, I'd just like to see that expanded a little bit. So downtown still a priority to me. Vibrancy is more melded with economic development in my book. Quality of life and public safety, I do agree we should add. And then planning and funding, future funding is the 4th. I think we can fold emergency and disaster preparedness, housing and safe routes under some of those categories because it feels like we're trying to pick and choose extra resources where some of these are core services as we defined them.
Councilmember Combs.
Yeah, I'm fine with that framing, but again, in the framing, you're making certain decisions. So you sort of said, let's take public safety, let's expand it to quality of life, and let's throw in the quiet zone, like, right? And so I might say, well, then let's throw in the Willow Exchange, and so then we're having that discussion. So my only thing is that you have to recognize that in that framing, you framed it in a bias that from your perspective and what you see as a priority and as it relates to the quiet zone specifically impacts your district. I'm not opposed to quiet zone. I've been on the record supporting quiet zone for a while, but it's just that, like, if we're going that route, then it becomes a free for all very quickly.
Yeah, to agree with you, I agree with you. So I would like to see things underneath those macro categories brought up. Maybe not today necessarily, but quiet zone isn't equal to housing. Like one is a project, one is an ongoing core service, right? So this is why I feel like the definitions are super important. And so I would like to see it, but I'm happy to have that debate in the future. But I think quality of life and public safety is a core service that we're going to elevate to a priority. So I'm just trying to get us out of this mixing and matching of things at all various levels so that we can have proper debates like you just said.
I would actually like to hear from other council members, but I would suggest that at the last 40 or 49 minutes of our session that we do not change this framework at this time, and instead we stay more with what we've currently got and debate whether or not these are the functions as we have it, and then think about either this year or certainly for next year's going into the priority setting, that we then take that different perspective. I don't think that they're that different, but I think that they're different enough that it needs more discussion than that we can handle in this timeframe.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just want clearer definition moving forward about what is, I think we've all said it in various ways. What is a priority? What do you get? What kind of extra attention are you going to get? What's a core service? What are you going to get? What are you not going to get? So yeah, I totally agree that I'm not trying to change the train as we're going down the track. I just want to say, like, I think part of the reason we're struggling with this is the definitions are very fuzzy and we're mixing and matching things at multiple levels and trying to do apples to apples when we're actually doing apples to oranges. So, yeah,
thank you. Okay, so let's put public safety aside until we have more of a discussion on the other items, given the timing that we have. And I guess I'd like to hear from others about of the priorities that we currently have: climate action, housing, safe streets, emergency preparedness, and downtown vibrancy. Is there anything on that list that should come off? I will start off by saying I originally had been one of the proponents of the emergency services. And at this point, I think that it is something that has moved on to real core function. Thank you, staff, for all you've done to get it there. And I actually would be comfortable with taking that off and perhaps leaving room for other items to move up. Having said that, I do like the other four priorities remaining. To me, I actually like the downtown vibrancy. To me, the economic development falls under that as opposed to being over that. But either way, I think we agree that it's all part of the same. So would anyone else like to provide input? Councilmember Combs.
I know, Mayor, when you said others, you meant others, not me.
Oh.
I'm going to go anyway. Could someone from staff explain to me, like, what keeping climate action, like, means? And again, I'll just, again, frame it from, and it's not new how I've framed it in the past. It's like, what do we have control over? We have control over downtown vibrancy. We have control over our safe routes. If public safety is something, we have some control over that. Obviously, we don't have control over to a percentage that actually has an impact, climate change. And so that's how I'm looking at it. And so you tell me what making it or continuing it as a priority delivers for the city specifically.
I will actually jump in for a minute if that's okay. And that is climate action to me, there is a huge impact to individuals' health as we electrify homes. People are now in a healthier environment, which is a tremendous benefit. And I think it truly does have a specific impact as opposed to what the global and helping the global environment and all. So I would argue that I would like to hear from staff, but I would very much argue that there actually is a specific impact, in fact, to individuals and across our city.
Okay, and I'll give you that one. And so then I think for me, the question is, like, our ability to move that needle, does it change if climate action is no longer a priority?
I think there's probably multiple ways to answer this, but what I'm looking at right now on my computer is the work plan for climate action. And so all of those projects are really what we try, and we try to capture everything here. Those are the projects that I think we're in many ways going the extra mile on to deliver on climate action. And it's everything from electrifying facilities to working with other agencies on shoreline adaptation, or implementing this multi-year program on electrification as well. That was grant funded. So that's kind of, I'm kind of looking at that list as, go ahead.
And so, like, if you left this meeting today and climate action was no longer a priority, would you be looking at that list differently? Is there something that is the efforts and the programs that relates to electrification for people who meet certain income thresholds. Would that go away? Would we not do that anymore? Would we not be looking for opportunities to transition to solar anymore? Would we stop our efforts to electrify the city's automobile fleet? That's again, because I think if the question is like, what is the value add of being a priority, then I think we can, that has to be spread broadly. And I know the city manager said energy, to some degree, and I could get that, but I think that this is what I'm trying to understand. If the city has built a lot of infrastructure here, is there something that goes away if it's not a priority?
Oh, that's a really tough question to answer.
Actually, and I think some of this, again, with every priority session, we flesh out a little bit more of the uncertainty, both of acknowledging there is and of better defining it. I guess at this point, how about if we go down the list of and see if there are more than, if there's enough consensus to take any of these off the list. Councilmember Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor Nash. One of the ways that I'm looking at the priorities on the list, it shows what's still in progress and then how many items have been completed. And just using the climate as one of the examples, I don't think anything has been completed on that list. Is that correct?
That's correct. Like there's one where the city council adopted local code amendments. It's not technically complete yet, but it's almost there. So that would be one I would call out. That's pretty much almost there.
Okay. Thank you.
So I guess we have the choice of going down the list. Why don't we just go down for each council member? Is there anything on the list that you would take off of those 5 priorities?
Thank you, Mayor Nash. I'd be comfortable taking emergency preparedness off the list.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Wise.
I agree with Councilmember Taylor.
Thank you. Councilmember Schmidt.
Yeah, a couple things. So on climate, I also I want to be super clear. We have a lot of work to do to convince individuals, because there's this myth that climate is outside of our control, but it's individual decisions in households, in cities, electric car versus gas car. So I won't get on my soapbox, although I'm super tempted. So I don't want climate to be off the list because I don't want 100-degree March. I don't want March to be 100 degrees next year. So climate's going to stay on it for the foreseeable future for me, and I think that's super important because we do have a lot of control. Downtown vibrancy, I agree with the mayor about, I don't care whether it's economic development or downtown vibrancy, as long as it's a package and reaching out to businesses in a more constructive way and working with them, that's key. I'm fine with emergency and disaster preparedness kind of moving down into the core services and function level. I'm actually fine with housing moving down if we need the space, but I'd prefer to keep it a priority. Safe routes, I'd also be fine with that coming down into the core services and function level, as long as we continue to focus on it. I would like to see quality of life and public safety be elevated to a priority. And then the proposal is I would like to see planning and future funding basically become a priority, because I think we need to start looking at what the next 10 years is going to look like. So I'd say moving down emergency and disaster preparedness and safe routes, and adding quality of life, public safety, and planning and funding.
Councilmember Combs.
Thank you, Mayor Nash. I would be supportive of, I'll use Councilmember Schmidt's vernacular, moving down climate action. Again, speaking not directly to the underpinning programs and projects, but moving that down as a priority. I am supportive of downtown vibrancy remaining a priority. Emergency and disaster preparedness, I would be supportive of moving down as a priority. housing, I'd also be supportive of moving down as a priority. I am supportive of safe routes being maintained in its current spot as a priority. And as I expressed, under certain conditions, I would be supportive of public safety being a priority.
Thank you. So it sounds like we have consensus that emergency and disaster preparedness is no longer a priority. I just want to make it very, very clear to everyone that it does not mean it is not an incredibly important function of the city. In fact, we feel very confident that we're now at a state where we can, it is an ongoing core function. I think that on climate action, there was not, that it will stay as a priority. Thank you for everybody's comments. Downtown vibrancy, I think, will stay as a priority. One of the things I want to also mention is that public safety is definitely a part of the downtown vibrancy. And as such, emergency and disaster preparedness, oh, I think we just went through that. Housing. I think we had at least 3 who wanted to keep that as a priority, if not 4 or 5. So that will stay as a priority. And just trying to move through as quickly as we can right now. Safe routes definitely sounded like a priority. At some point, I would very briefly like to discuss, there was, or perhaps it's outside of this, about the comment about safe routes to school, which we had a few, both online and also public speakers refer to. Just can that be modified to focus more on infrastructure and less on education and encouragement? And I guess I would just quickly like to see whether anyone disagrees with that on the council. So there's consensus that if that would be a focus, please, under safe routes. Beyond that, public safety. I think we definitely want to have that as a study session. What I am hearing from council, and again, acknowledging, I think we all are very aware of the situation, very much want to deal with it. And it sounds like from what I'm hearing that it is something that will be rising to a priority on council, and that we will have a future study session on that. One of the pieces that I would like to have as part of that is how do we, a big piece of public safety is in fact the staff, the officers, and both sworn and non-sworn staff within the police department. That is currently, I believe, our largest has our largest vacancy rate by a very small amount. But how do we better recruit and retain for our police department? Realizing that Chief Norris has done an amazing job with the police department over the last 5 years, and has really, we do not want to in any way diminish that high standard that you have set. So it's how do we improve our recruitment and retention within that high standard that you have set. And I personally would hesitate to add quality of life to public safety, but I'm curious how others it feels very, it feels like it starts to unfocus us from the core concern of public safety, although definitely quality of life is tied into that. But I'll start over. Any comments about, would it be public safety or public safety and quality of life?
I believe that if you speak to some of our residents, that they would think that they are linked.
Yeah. So you're saying public safety covers both?
I think that they're linked, and I believe that with the title, it seems more intentional, but it makes me think about the mission of Menlo Park. I believe that quality of life is in there. I haven't read the mission in a while. It used to be a part of our agenda, goal setting, the agenda packet, but to me, they're linked. They're definitely linked.
So are you saying that you would like to see it as public safety and quality of life, or just public safety you think is an umbrella enough?
I'm going to look to the chief because a lot of your feedback a little while ago was very helpful.
Yeah, if I may, just very, very briefly, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and especially in conversations that I've had with folks in your neighborhood specifically, like those things are absolutely linked together. Part of the concept is, it's not just law enforcement. It's not just the enforcement of laws. It is policing, which is the relationship between the police and the community and the feeling of safety that our residents have. That is absolutely a quality of life question.
So well, I guess I will state my concern about adding quality of life to that is then we get into, for example, the quiet zones and all, and the scope could greatly increase from what we're right now focused on, thank you, please.
I will say that's why you guys at least hold, if not make the big bucks. That's a decision for council to I think square away. I do think that provision of a safety and the perception and feeling of safety is a responsibility of the police department, but it only exists as a responsibility in coordination with other aspects of the city government.
Councilmember Schmidt.
Yeah, let me clarify my intent too, because I didn't mean for them to be the same thing. So it was a purposeful broadening of scope, because I would like to see the pools in there, the Belhaven, both the pools in there, because that's a quality of life issue. I'd like to see quiet zone in there. So I am fully coming forward and saying that was totally my intent. If the council says we want to keep it narrow on public safety, I totally respect that. But I feel like there are broader community quality of life issues that we can continue to funnel through this if we choose to do that. It wasn't to mingle them together and make them the same thing as public safety. Those to me they're all part of our quality of life. So if folks agree that we want to be covering these topics, then that's what I'm sort of asking people to vote on, is other things in addition to public safety under this category. So.
Through the mayor. Just a thought, and since we're probably not going to come to a final decision about this in the next 30 minutes, is the discussion about the definition of quality of life as we're deciding the definition of city priorities for the next one. So maybe a category of quality of life should be a priority, and then the council at that time would decide what that looks like. Because I do think that there's value there. There's some things that's on the list that I, as a council member, may not support, but it is something that community members keep bringing up. And then also to Councilmember Combs' point about when community members bring up things and we do not at least address them as far as what we're working on, even though they may be addressed behind the scenes, but just to give voice to the community.
Could you?
So what I'm saying is we're having a study session on on policing, because I believe it's not just the break-ins. I believe that it's definitely broader than that. The council would decide next year about having quality of life as an independent priority. That way, there's other pieces that can live there, the pool, the quiet zones, whatever the council decides would be underneath that. But I always look to the city manager and his team to give direction on that, because maybe something doesn't need to be there, but it still gives us space.
And you're saying that would not happen this year?
At this moment, no.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Wise, do you have, going back to quality of life, how would you, public safety or public safety and quality of life?
I think I think I would actually, if we are going to add quality of life, I think I would actually have it as its own standalone instead of wrapped in with public safety. I think public safety should be its own this year. And then if we want to add quality of life, which I'm happy to do, I would, as Councilmember Taylor and Schmidt have said, have a follow-up agenda item where we will define like what we are including under quality of life.
Thank you. And I believe we've heard from Councilmember Schmidt, Councilmember Combs. Anything to add? Okay. I would say at this, it sounds like we are adding public safety, that we will have a study session, and any decision about quality of life will happen later. And my guess is, given everything that's currently on our plate and our budget constraints, that will probably be part of next year's priority setting. All right. Thank you. And if some miracle happens and we can do it this year, terrific. All right. And
there is just to chime in one. I mean, just to be clear, some of the things that Councilmember Schmidt and myself might classify under that quality of life are things that will be worked on. Like, right. And so the quiet zone will still continue. I know the landscaping of Highway 101, which I know you didn't put as a quality of life, but you, I mean, so the core things there will continue. And then there'll be some later discussion.
Really good point. And so one of the things that I would recommend for people who are interested in what are all the things that the city is working on that are sort of above and beyond core services, please take a look at the city's work plan, which was just in the March 10th city council packet. And there's a very long list of maybe 80 items or something. Only 58 items of specifics that the city is working on by department area and priority area. Anyway, it is all there. There is an excellent document that really gives you an idea of what is happening there. I guess I'm wondering, with the last 26 minutes, it seems that we've done a fair amount with the priorities, and we still need to talk about the EJ element. Is that correct? Oh, and the centennial. Thank you.
As far as the EJ element, it was my understanding we might talk more about that when it comes to council as the next agenda item on the 24th. But if there was something specific anyone wanted to turn back to, we can definitely do that.
Okay, and you had been wondering, there was a question about, not you specifically, but there was a question about the food. And again, that can be handled we can talk about that more at next Tuesday. Or would you like some discussion right now?
Maybe in the interest of time, we save it for now. But if anyone has strong thoughts, we can also take them now.
Any? Councilmember Taylor, anything specific? Okay, thank you. We will discuss that on Tuesday with our other long agenda, meeting agenda. Okay, the centennial. And can you review what you're looking for from the centennial?
Yes, actually, we have a few slides on this, and our assistant to the city manager, city clerk, is presenting it.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mayor, City Council members. Okay, screen is up. So November 23rd of 2027 marks the 100-year anniversary of Menlo Park's final incorporation. Staff intends to embed centennial activities and themes within city-hosted community events. The draft plan includes the first centennial theme at the December 2026 Light Up the Season event, and then continuing with other events in 2027. Activities include historical displays, themed performances, community crafts, branded swag, and partnerships with local businesses and community partners. Staff is working closely with the Menlo Park Historical Association for historical content and education elements to include throughout the year. We will also engage with local businesses and community groups to integrate into these city events. The main centennial celebration will occur in November of 2027 with a host of activities for the community. As part of the annual update on city-hosted events in August of this year, staff will provide more details on the planning, dates, partnerships, and budget. And that does conclude the centennial presentation.
Thank you very much. It looks like a lot of nice planning is happening with that. Any discussion, comments, clarifications from City Council? All right, Ed, you've got strong support here. So Assistant City Manager Stephen Stolte will take us through the next steps.
Great. And we have one slide on this too. So our next steps are just to produce the final workshop report that documents all the discussion today and the outcomes. That will be coming to you in April. And then we will start developing our fiscal year 26-27 work plan. And then just incorporate your top priorities into the budget development process too. So you'll hear more about your priorities in that way too. We will update the webpage after the workshop.
Thank you. Any final thoughts, Councilmember Schmidt?
Just a quick plan, Steve, Assistant Manager Stolte. So part of the discussion around defining priorities and core services and everything, will some of that be incorporated? I know we still need to be more specific, but I think we have a good sense of what the definitions are starting to look like. Will those show up in the work plan in any way, or are we kind of punting that to the future council to decide what those definitions might look like? I think there could be some value in taking a basic run at what that might mean, even in the current work plan, if there was openness to that. But I just wanted to see what your perspective was.
Well, number one, we'll definitely document the discussion today on that topic, and then we can certainly take a look at how we might propose definitions too, based on what you've all discussed.
Thanks.
Councilmember Collins.
Yeah, and again, that for me, that'll be much appreciated. I do think that we have to acknowledge that like those definitions will always change, like, right? Different councils will change. And even as a council member, I might approach those definitions differently than someone else. And so I do think we have to accept there's a certain muck to the process that the definitions won't provide us the quite escape that we want. I do think that they're needed, but again, like at the end of the day, like again, we all get to come to those definitions as we want to, and that's going to continue to happen.
And I guess I would just say that I don't want staff to have even more work on some of this. So to the extent that that is still, I think, quite ambiguous is, or is subject to interpretation, as Councilmember Combs was saying. So to the extent that you can, great, but please don't spend a lot of staff time worrying about that, because I think it's, we'd much rather see other deliverables. Thank you. Councilmember Taylor? No. All right. Anything else?
Just thank you all so much for spending Saturday with us, and thank you for everyone for participating today. This was great information, so we'll start preparing the follow-up report.
Thank you. And just a tremendous effort by staff to pull this together, especially not having a consultant helping us with all the work behind the scenes, and really appreciate everything. Also, especially to our new financial director, Vinny Lai. That was an amazing presentation, and your explanation of VLF was the clearest that I've ever heard. And I've been hearing quite a few different explanations recently, so thank you so much. Very good. We are adjourned. Thank you so much.